Chapter 272. In the Scarlet World, a technological civilization more than 30,000 kilometers underground, there was a blood-red light curtain that seemed to be tens of thousands of kilometers in circumference. Enveloped by the blood-red light curtain was a boundlessly vast and strange world. There were countless living beings and natural wonders in this world. Mountains, swamps, plains, deserts, forests, grasslands, and so on. Almost all the food that a complete world should have had was here. However, compared to a normal world, such as the spirit space that Luo Fan had created and the untainted land, this world was covered with a faint layer of blood. It was as if the whole world was condensed by this wonderful blood-red light. Shockingly, it was a boundless and all-encompassing blood-red world. The extremely dense and surging fiendish blood that had soared 90,000 miles into the sky had come from this blood-red world. If that was all, Luo Fan would not be so shocked, even though he was surprised. What really shocked Luo Fan to the point that he almost lost control of his Taoist heart was that this world had developed a technological civilization. How could this be? This is the untainted land. How could there be such a technological civilization? This was the only thought that was echoing in Luo Fan's mind. This blood-red world was boundless, and it covered an area of tens of thousands of kilometers. In it, there were billions of intelligent creatures similar to human beings in the future. The speed of time in this blood-red world was more than 10,000 times that of the untainted land. Almost every time Luo Fan blinked an eye, several hours would pass. When Luo Fan arrived, a war that affected the whole world was taking place in this blood-red world. Because it was a technological civilization, the momentum of this war was earth-shattering. All kinds of guns, tanks, fighters, and other hot weapons showed their powerful destructive power in the entire world. All kinds of conspiracies, tricks, and battles of wits were constantly showing the wisdom of humans in the world to Luo Fan. In a world war like this, tens of thousands of people were dying almost every second. While Luo Fan was shocked and in disbelief, almost a day had passed in the blood-red world. The number of people who died was more than a few 100,000. If this rate of death continued for a few months, it would not be a big deal for billions of creatures to die in this world. The blood fiends that had soared 90,000 miles into the sky and crashed into the long rainbows were produced by the creatures in this world after they died, naturally fusing with the world, and were naturally refined into blood fiends. The more he observed this world, the more shocked Luo Fan was. It's similar to the civilization on Earth in the 1940s. The technology wasn't too advanced, but the development of gunpowder weapons was close to its peak. Moreover, these creatures seemed to be under the control of some kind of power, becoming extremely violent and barbaric. His mind reverberated with his assessment of this world. With a thought, he took a step forward and directly rushed into the evil blood. He used the so close yet worlds apart method and went straight down at an extremely fast speed. Although the evil blood contained in this peak was extremely strong, it was only emitted unconsciously by the blood-red world after all, and was not targeted at Luo Fan. Even though Luo Fan was prepared, it could not affect him at all. Not long after, Luo Fan had already arrived more than 30,000 kilometers underground, where the blood-colored world was located. He touched the blood-red light curtain with his tentacles, and a smooth, soft, and smooth feeling like touching jelly came from his hands. He exerted a little force, and an unimaginable killing intent and evil chi surged from his hands, rushing straight into Luo Fan's Naiwan palace with an irresistible force, trying to rush straight into the world of Luo Fan's sea of consciousness from that position. Luo Fan frowned and with a thought. This killing intent and baleful aura were instantly cut off and completely blocked outside of his body. This thing has been completely infected and assimilated by the evil blood. This thought emerged in Luo Fan's mind. He took back his hand, raised his eyes, and looked into the distance. Golden and silver lights flashed quickly in his eyes, as he tried his best to see through the extremely strong evil chi around him, and to find the origin of this blood-red world. The great sun-golden pupils and the bright moon-silver pupils were quite powerful. Whenever he thought of this, all kinds of things, images, and mysteries in the outside world would be reconstructed in his mind through his eyes, and this blood-red world would be reconstructed in his mind. This is a drop of essence blood, and it contains such a huge amount of power. Is this the legendary essence blood of Pan-gu? After reconstructing this world, Luo Fan seemed to understand the origin of this blood-red world. In his sea of consciousness, this world was vividly in the shape of a drop of blood-red liquid. The volume of this drop of liquid was really huge, almost like a sphere with a diameter of tens of thousands of miles. However, no matter how he looked at it, it was an incomparably sticky drop of blood, which seemed to contain an immeasurable amount of essence. As this thought emerged in his mind, this blood-red world suddenly underwent some mysterious changes in his mind. As if time was flowing backward at an extremely high speed, all kinds of scenes in this blood-red world kept changing. Creatures in this world were reborn and returned to their mothers' wombs. All kinds of terrains and natural environments in this world were quickly reversed, and then returned to the beginning. In a blink of an eye, the model of this blood-red world built in his mind turned turbid because of the changing speed. After a while, the turbid became clear and transparent. Eventually, it became a drop of blood that was as big as a sphere with a diameter of tens of thousands of miles, emitting an unyielding, all-encompassing sense of power that contained all the truths of the world. Just as I thought. This is indeed the essence blood of Pan-gu. Luo Fan's eyes flashed with the light of enlightenment, and the process of the whole world returning to its original state of mind constantly flashed in his mind. Suddenly, he seemed to have a new level of understanding of the birth and death of the world, and felt that he seemed to be close to the origin of the world. His cultivation realm seemed to have slightly improved. With this new understanding of the birth and death of a world, Luo Fan re-examined this scientific and civilized world that he was so familiar with. A new understanding emerged in his mind. This world has come to an end. The entire world is about to step on the path of destruction. After the world is destroyed, this drop of spirit blood will release all its power and generate a strong explosion, which will flatten this mountain range, and may even shatter the world to a certain extent. This drop of blood was Pan-gu's spirit blood, which was even closer to the origin of Pan-gu than Buzhou Mountain in the current prehistorical world. If it released all its power, it would be powerful enough to flatten the area with a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles, turn this area into an ocean of lava, and even break the layer of gale, thunder, and fire above it and affect the starry sky. It wouldn't have much effect on the prehistorical world, but it would be too wasteful to let such a great amount of energy dissipate like this. Instead of exploding like this, I might as well collect it. In the future, I can use it to forge treasures or merge it with my body. Such a thought flashed across Ji Hao's mind. As this thought flashed across his mind, Ji Hao took a step forward and came to the top of this drop of blood, which was the most special point of this drop of blood. This was the last point of this drop of blood, and also the point where the world inside the drop of blood would be destroyed the last time. Or, it could be called the end of the world. At this point, a sense of despair and destruction had condensed into a solid state, blowing towards Luo Fan like a hurricane. It was the despair emitted by the world that was about to be destroyed, and the sense of destruction was the root cause of the entire world's destruction. Under this sense of despair and destruction, even Luo Fan found it a little difficult to control his body. He stood there, swaying a little, as if he could not stop himself from falling towards the end of the world. Feeling that something was wrong, Luo Fan's mind moved, and a vast and unyielding aura emanated from his body. Under this aura, no matter how strong the sense of despair and destruction was, it could not shake his body. He seemed to be fixed in the void, as steady as a rock, unshakable. This blood-red world seemed to have a spirit, and could sense Luo Fan's movements. When Luo Fan arrived at the end of the world, the time in the world suddenly sped up by hundreds of times. The process of the war also sped up by more than 1,000 times. In the blink of an eye, the boundless blood-red world, which contained who knew how many billions of living beings, was drowned by endless explosions. These explosions were like countless nuclear bombs. They were so powerful that they directly destroyed the structure of the world, destroyed the countless living beings, destroyed the incredible natural environment, and destroyed all traces of civilization. The blood fiends that rushed out from the blood-red world became even thicker. Because the surging blood fiends were so thick, they gradually underwent some mysterious changes. 90,000 miles up in the sky, the blood fiends gradually condensed. They were originally scattered in all directions, but they gradually condensed into a blood-colored cloud. The cloud grew bigger and thicker. In the blink of an eye, the cloud had expanded to a radius of 10,000 kilometers, like a blood-red curtain of the sky. It surged up high in the sky. Even though it was seeping out from the ground, if one looked up, they would still be able to see the inconceivable changes happening to the blood-red cloud in the sky. Is this the purpose of this world? To use the blood fiends to take form and transcend? Luo Fan's heart skipped a beat. He raised his head and saw the cloud formed from the blood fiends. His eyes had the ability to see through all appearances, to see through all origins. He was able to easily see through the spiritual sense that was taking form in the depths of the blood fiend cloud, destroying trillions of living beings for the sake of taking form. Luo Fan sighed, feeling rather conflicted. Chapter 273. The Blade of Spacetime, the Spirit of the World. It seems that my Tao heart still needs to be tempered. After a long time, Luo Fan sighed. With a thought, the earth immortal Tao fruit in his body suddenly collapsed and turned into Dharma power. This magic power circulated through his meridians for 810 mysterious and unpredictable cycles. Then, he raised his hand and covered it. After these cycles, the magic power had already rushed out of his palm and turned into countless complex and mysterious patterns. They quickly circulated and crazily shuttled back and forth. In the blink of an eye, they condensed into a strange blade that looked like a blade and a sword, but neither a blade nor a sword. It directly broke the blood-colored light screen and directly rushed into the blood-colored world. This strange weapon was constructed from all of Luo Fan's Dharma power. It was condensed from Luo Fan's cultivation and contained all of his understanding of time and space. It had incredible power and a rather mysterious name, Blade of Spacetime. This blade was not a Dharma artifact or a Dharma treasure, but it was more magical than any Dharma artifact or Dharma treasure. If it was slashed in the void, it could separate the void from the great spacetime, allowing the void to become a separate entity. If it was slashed on living beings, it would depend on the level of power. If the power was enough to break through the defense of living beings, it would be able to split the living beings into two parts. If the power was insufficient, of course, it would not be effective. There was no need to say anything else. With Luo Fan's current cultivation realm, he was naturally still far from being able to split the void of the primordial world. However, it was not difficult for him to split the world created by a drop of blood essence. After the blade of spacetime rushed into the blood-colored world, it slashed repeatedly in the void at the end of the world. In the blink of an eye, it had slashed 129,600 times. When the last slash was completed, 129,600 mysterious and wonderful trajectories flashed in the void. After a series of distortions and reorganization, they formed an extremely mysterious three-dimensional talisman. It began to expand rapidly from the end of the world. At an indescribable speed, it had expanded to the entire world in the blink of an eye. The place where the space-time blade pierced was the end of the world. That was a location hidden in the depths of the Scarlet World's space-time, hidden in the inner layer of the world. For the entire Scarlet World, there was no difference in the specific location. No matter where one was, one only needed to use a certain method to reach the end of the world. As such, the process of the three-dimensional talisman expanding to the end of the world was incomparably mysterious. It wasn't the kind of continuous enlargement that enveloped the entire world. Instead, it was an expanding process that no one could grasp its trajectory. In the blink of an eye, the three-dimensional talisman, which had appeared at the end of the world, spread to every corner of the world, enveloping the entire world and overlapping with it. The instant the three-dimensional talisman overlapped with the entire blood-red world, the time and space of the blood world seemed to have been completely separated. The blood-colored world seemed to be completely isolated from this drop of Pangu's blood essence and the primordial world. Pangu's blood essence was still Pangu's blood essence, and the blood world was still the blood world. However, there was no longer any connection between the two. The blood evil spirit that had rushed out of Pangu's blood essence because of the death of countless living beings was instantly cut off. The space around Pangu's blood essence became clear at a speed visible to the naked eye. Where Luo Fan was, the seemingly tangible sense of despair and destruction disappeared without a trace in an instant. After the blood world was separated from Pangu's blood essence, this place was no longer the end of the world. There was no sense of despair and destruction. At this moment, the inside of the blood world became turbid, as if a layer of clouds had filled the blood world. The explosions that had been detonated previously and affected the entire world had connected, creating an endless superposition. The entire world completely collapsed in the instant these explosions overlapped. Spatial fragments, all kinds of primordial chi, the essence of the five elements, the heavenly spirits and earthly fiends, earth, water, fire, wind, and so on. Almost everything was intertwined, forming a muddy existence that looked like muddy water. Then, amidst a flash of light, everything returned to peace. The entire blood world turned into a blood-red color that was as pure as blood jade, rolling in the three-dimensional talisman formed by the 129,600 spacetime blades. This was the acceleration of the destruction of the blood world. In the blink of an eye, it was completely destroyed. Moreover, because of the three-dimensional talisman formed by the spacetime blades, the blood evil spirit and the explosive power produced when it was destroyed could not break through the blood world. In addition, the connection between the blood world and Pangu's blood essence had been cut off. Naturally, it could not trigger the power of this drop of blood that was suspected to be Pangu's blood essence. At the moment when the entire world was destroyed, all the living beings in the blood world died at the same time. The number was probably more than 1 trillion, including non-human creatures. The blood evil spirit that was emitted at this moment was incomparably huge, and it instantly covered the entire blood world. Judging from the amount, it was probably more than all the blood evil spirit that had been released before. No! At this moment, an incomparably shrill roar exploded from the sky above 90,000 kilometers. This voice contained infinite power and anger. It surged the primordial chi and earthly fiends within a radius of hundreds of thousands of kilometers, causing these primordial chi and earthly fiends to undergo an extremely huge change. They turned into all kinds of wind, thunder, lightning, and violent storms, as if the heavens and the earth were raging. Attracted by this voice, Luo Fan looked up and saw that the blood evil spirit had condensed into a 10,000 feet tall, blood-red, ferocious giant covered in bone spikes. However, this giant looked extremely unstable. Every part of its body was constantly twisting and shrinking, sometimes turning into a blood mist, and sometimes turning into a solid body. It was changing rapidly. Obviously, because of the loss of the last wave of blood evil spirit, this giant had failed. Although it had managed to condense a rough shape, it could not completely take shape. The loud roar that surged the primordial chi and earthly fiends within a radius of hundreds of thousands of kilometers had come from this giant's mouth. You borrowed the blood evil spirit to take shape. Even if you completely took shape, the killing intent in the blood evil spirit will break through the defenses of your heart, and you will become a muddle-headed life that only knows how to kill. You can't blame me for stopping you from taking shape, Luo Fan said with an indifferent expression. Under his control, his voice traveled tens of thousands of miles, directly reaching the blood-red giant from 30,000 miles underground to 90,000 miles up in the sky, blasting directly into the blood-red giant's ears. Unfortunately, the blood-red giant did not respond to these words at all. It only roared wantonly, venting its anger. With the help of its voice, it stirred the primordial chi within a radius of hundreds of thousands of kilometers, making it seem like the end of the world had arrived. Of course, Luo Fan was not asking for the opinion of the blood-red giant. He only said this to give himself a reason. Seeing this, he was not surprised. He just raised his hand, turning, releasing, and withdrawing the spacetime blade. The three-dimensional talisman composed of 129,600 traces expanded, wrapping the entire drop of blood essence, allowing the blood jade formed after the destruction of the blood-red world to fuse with Pangu's blood essence. Then, it suddenly withdrew, compressing this drop of blood essence into a drop of liquid with a radius of 30 meters. The world inside the blood essence had disappeared, and this drop of blood essence had naturally turned into a material that contained a huge amount of energy. With a small change in spacetime, the volume of this drop of blood essence could be compressed. After compressing this drop of blood essence, Luo Fan raised his hand and put this drop of blood essence into his universe in his sleeve. Right at this moment, the giant above had already transformed into a streak of bloody light, wrapped in boundless astral winds, lightning, fire, heavenly astral winds, earthly fiends, wind, thunder, and mountain rocks. With a speed that surpassed practically everything, it directly rushed down from the 9 heavens towards Luo Fan. At this moment, a mysterious invisible force suddenly surrounded Luo Fan. This force seemed to be extremely strong, but also extremely weak. It seemed to have no effect on Luo Fan, and it seemed to completely suppress him. It was mysterious and indescribably wonderful. It turns out to be spacelock. This kind of innate magic is really powerful. Fortunately, you haven't really taken shape. Otherwise, all the innate gods would have suffered a disaster before the arrival of the untainted land. Sensing the invisible force approaching him, Luo Fan's understanding of the original spirit of Pangu emerged from the depths of his divine soul, and his mind suddenly gave birth to an indescribable joy. The mysterious invisible force directly targeted his physical body, locking the space around him. If he did not dodge, this force would not have any effect. But if he wanted to dodge, this force would instantly increase to an incredible level, and it would blast him back to where he was. Affected by the giant's innate magic, Luo Fan could only take the powerful attack of the giant from the height of 90,000 miles. Understanding this, his eyes shone with golden and silver light. The various violent forces of the giant were instantly decomposed in his mind, and the strength and profoundness of them were no longer concealed. After distinguishing the strength and profoundness, Luo Fan suddenly exclaimed in his mind, "You really deserve to be the incarnation of the world. If you hadn't met me, even Hongjun might not have been able to bear your attack." This giant was a creature formed by the internal world of the essence blood with the help of the evil blood. Its knowledge was all-encompassing. This attack seemed to be just a collision of brute force, but in fact it contained infinite martial arts mysteries. Whether it was the angle, trajectory, strength, or the concentration of power, it had reached an indescribable level. If he didn't know the mystery, even Luo Fan could not bear such an attack. After exclaiming in admiration, Luo Fan raised his hand and pointed. The space-time blade formed by the magic power decomposed and recombined into a pure light needle, which was launched directly from his hand and rushed up. In a short while, it had rushed up tens of thousands of miles into the sky, and went straight into the heart of the giant, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Then, a grayish-brown light flashed, and the blood-red giant was instantly covered by the grayish-brown light. At this moment, there seemed to be a grayish-brown sun in the sky. Chapter 274. The Spirit of Nature, the Flaming Dragon. The huge amount of yuan qi, evil qi, essence qi, and other energies that were carried by the giant were like a breeze that passed by without a trace. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared without a trace, as if they had never appeared. Only the energy vacuum formed by the rapid disappearance of the energy caused the huge amount of yuan qi, evil qi, essence qi, and other energies to gather, as well as the whirlpool formed by the rapid gathering of the wind, thunder, and fire layer, could the various changes that happened before be seen. In the clear sky, Luo Fan's magical power twisted in the air, and his whole body was wrapped in a gray mist. It was like a real dragon that was made of flesh and blood, and could automatically condense clouds around its body. He gently raised his hand and beckoned. The magic power that was like a flood dragon flashed and returned to his body in the blink of an eye. It spun in his lower abdomen and condensed into a mysterious earthly immortal Tao fruit that seemed both real and illusory. However, around this earthly immortal Tao fruit, there was still a gray mist surrounding it. This gray mist was none other than the power of the giant and all the yuan qi, evil qi, essence qi, and all kinds of essence qi within a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles that was carried by the giant towards Luo Fan. Just now, when the magic power condensed into a thin needle and pierced into the giant's heart, because Luo Fan possessed the golden eyes of the great sun and the silver eyes of the bright moon, he had a complete grasp of the giant's weakness. Therefore, the thin needle directly went around the giant's body in a mysterious and wonderful trajectory, passing through all the defenses in his body and directly hitting the weakest core spiritual sense in his body, disintegrating his body and his spiritual sense. This magic power was condensed by Luo Fan's lifetime of cultivation. It was mysterious and had unimaginably powerful power. It also had some kind of independent spirituality. Even if it had already separated from Luo Fan's body, this magical power still showed an unimaginable autonomy. As it meandered, it fully displayed the truth of the great Tao that Luo Fan had comprehended. It was naturally very easy to destroy this world incarnation that had been contaminated by blood and evil spirits and only knew how to kill without a complete self-consciousness. After everything that had happened last night, the magic power directly gathered the giant's own power, as well as the endless yuan qi, astral baleful qi, essence qi, and other energies around the magic power. It formed a layer of dusky clouds and mist. Originally, this energy was an extremely huge supplement for the magical power units. However, now that Luo Fan's mana units were all full, he could not accommodate this energy. Of course, he would not waste this energy. Therefore, the energy was transformed into a gray mist that surrounded the magic power. Feeling the sense of completion brought by the earthly immortal Tao fruit in his body, Luo Fan let out a long sigh, and a slightly satisfied smile appeared on his face. Suddenly, there was a powerful and unparalleled heat rolling up from below. This heat was so strong that even Luo Fan felt his body was slightly hot. Along with the heat, there was also an extremely dense turbid aura that was so dense that it almost condensed into a substance. Luo Fan's mind moved. He looked down and saw that a large amount of dark red magma was surging up from below at an extremely fast speed. This magma had been accumulating underground for a long time. Perhaps it was because it had been suppressed by Pangu's blood essence for too long, or because it was contaminated with the aura of Pangu's blood essence. In short, at this time, the magma that was surging up from below had a very strange spirituality, causing the magma to produce some kind of mysterious and indescribable changes. This change caused countless dragon-like roars to constantly come out from the magma as it rushed up from below, and the substance of the magma condensed into 9 huge, long, and scaly flood dragons. The creation of nature is really mysterious and incredible. Luo Fan did not know how many times he had sighed with emotion, but every time he saw such an incredible scene, he could not help but sigh with emotion. Although he sighed with emotion, he did not have the idea of staying here to enjoy it, so he took a step forward. In a few flashes, his figure had already crossed the more than 30,000 miles deep mountain entrance, and directly came to the top of the mountain. The moment he stopped moving, earth-shaking dragon roars could be heard from down below. Along with these roars, an incomparably strong heat rose into the sky. 9 flood dragons, which were condensed from dark red magma and wrapped in turbid air streams, darted out of the mountain entrance. The tails of these 9 flood dragons were straight down to the ground, while their tens of thousands of miles long bodies hovered above the mountain and formed a tens of thousands of miles wide magma cloud, covering a big half of the mountain range. The intense heat and the dense turbid air spread in all directions. They clashed against the natural energies, evil energies, and spirit energies that gathered from the hundreds of thousands of miles wide area due to the energy vacuum in the outside world, causing an earth-shaking vibration and a tremendous sound and light effect. These lights and shadows made the magma cloud seem to be wrapped in a thicker and thicker mist. The dragon roars and the explosions caused by the energy collisions wove together, and the effect was as if the sky and the earth were being destroyed. After a long time, these intense sound and light effects disappeared. After the sound and light effects disappeared, the 9 divine dragons did not shrink back to the mountain entrance. Instead, they kept hovering in the void, covering a radius of 100 miles, forming an indescribable wonder. Luo Fan stood in the void, his eyes flashing with golden and silver light. He had already seen the essence of these 9 magma dragons clearly. In the blink of an eye, he already knew that these 9 magma dragons were existences that were similar to spiritual beings. However, their spiritual consciousness was still not complete, and it seemed that they were only at the beginning of spiritual nature. In the future, if they could occasionally absorb enough pneuma, they might be able to condense into real living beings. Although they would not be as talented as the innate gods, they would not be comparable to ordinary postnatal living beings. But it would take several yuanhui to achieve that. For this great calamity of the untainted land, it was of no use. After watching for a while, Luo Fan was too lazy to care about these 9 magma dragons. He just glanced at them and his body shook. He turned into a dark cyan rainbow and shot straight to the northwest of Buzhou Mountain. This place was more than 70 billion miles away from the untainted land. Although Luo Fan was fast, it would still take him a few days to cross such a long distance to reach Buzhou Mountain. During these days, as Luo Fan hurried on his way, he carefully observed the various sceneries of the untainted land with the help of his gold and silver eyes. As a result, all kinds of indescribable natural sceneries of the untainted land were constantly imprinted in his mind as he observed them. The current untainted land had only been established for a few yuanhui, and the evolution of the world was naturally not complete. The natural sceneries of the untainted land were naturally evolved from the great way of heaven and earth, and naturally carried the natural mystery of the great way of heaven and earth. After Luo Fan's magic power exceeded 1 million, his cultivation realm was greatly improved, and his perception became stronger. If he were to expand his spiritual sense to the extreme, everything within a radius of 300,000 miles would be reflected in his mind, no matter how big or small. With such perception, it was naturally easier and deeper to comprehend the great way of heaven and earth. During the few days of flying more than 70 billion miles, he felt that his understanding of the great way of heaven and earth had deepened a lot, and he felt that his cultivation realm seemed to have improved a little. He also had a deeper understanding of the dozens of magical powers and incantations in the Tao Fruit scripture. He had never expected these kinds of gains, but it was also a kind of unexpected joy. On this day, Luo Fan finally crossed the long distance and came to Buzhou Mountain. With a slight flicker of his mind, the dark cyan streak of light that he had transformed into suddenly soared up, condensed, and landed on the peak of Buzhou Mountain, right on the surface of the liquid primordial Qi Ocean. With a thought, the development of various things in the past 200 years flowed through his mind like running water. The first, of course, was the change of the space-time illusion at the foot of Buzhou Mountain. In front of the space-time illusion was Luo Fan's doppelganger celestial device. With a thought, through some mysterious connection, the memory of the doppelganger celestial device would flow into his mind. Therefore, at this time, with a thought, he instantly knew the change below. In the past 200 years, the number of innate gods that were invited by the three gods of Buzhou Mountain in the space-time illusion had increased by more than 60. It was a remarkable achievement. However, the aptitude and cultivation realm of these innate gods were just ordinary. Although they were not weak, and each had their own strange abilities, they did not bring many surprises to Luo Fan. With his mind attached to the space-time illusion, Luo Fan had already brought the scene in the space-time illusion into his mind. After a while, he let out a sigh. Although they are not simple, except for a few people, it is basically impossible for them to become the real decisive fighting force after more than 30,000 years. He thought in his heart. This was also inevitable. Although the time in the space-time illusion was 10 times that of the outside world, the 200 years in there were only equivalent to 2,000 years. For those innate gods who could close their eyes for hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of years, 2,000 years was nothing. Now, I can only do my best and leave it to God's will. I only hope that the innate gods that come in the future can be a little stronger. Luo Fan thought in his heart. He filled his mind with all kinds of knowledge that the doppelganger celestial device had gained over the years, as well as all kinds of cultivation methods that he had obtained, and added them into the Tao Fruit scripture, making this scripture a little more substantial. With a thought, he took a step forward and disappeared instantly. In the blink of an eye, he had already stepped into the mini Kiliacosm inside the Wuji Palace. Chapter 275. Core, Sun Transformation, Yao Dao. After Luo Fan entered the minor Kiliacosm, he directly floated in the boundless starry sky. As he stood there and looked down at the vast land, he suddenly moved slightly. Boundless information and memories flowed through his mind and consciousness, quickly transforming into his memories. This was him borrowing the memory of the Infinity Boy to incorporate all the changes in the minor Kiliacosm in his own perception. In the blink of an eye, Luo Fan completely grasped every detail of the changes in the minor Kiliacosm as if he had seen it with his own eyes. I didn't think there would be such changes. This is really... After completely grasping the changes in the minor Kiliacosm, Luo Fan couldn't help but feel like crying and laughing. After more than a yuan hui, not only did Luo Chunyang, who only needed to spend some time consolidating his divine flame realm, come out of seclusion, but Luo Fu, who needed to consolidate his divine reversion realm and was forced by Luo Fan to go into seclusion for yuan hui, had also completed his divine reversion realm. It had been more than 20,000 years since he came out. In all these years, because Luo Fan didn't give them the permission to enter and leave the minor Kiliacosm, Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang could only travel and survive in this minor Kiliacosm. Although this minor Kiliacosm was very vast and had an unknown population of hundreds of millions, for real masters, this minor Kiliacosm was still too small. With the level of civilization in this small Kiliacosm, Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang's cultivation level was definitely at the peak. They had long surpassed anyone in this small Kiliacosm and had even surpassed the peak that this small Kiliacosm could withstand. In this minor Kiliacosm, apart from the two of them, there was another person who had reached the peak that this minor Kiliacosm could bear. That was Ape Lei. Therefore, after so many years, the three of them had inevitably met each other by chance. After the three met, after some communication, they all knew each other's identities. There were many probing, guessing, and misunderstandings, but there was no need to say too much, just knowing the result was enough. The three of them were all overjoyed and treated each other as fellow countrymen. After that, things developed in a very old-fashioned way. Because there was nothing new to do in this minor thousand world, the three of them decided to leave behind evidence of their existence in this minor thousand world so that when Luo Fan came, he could praise them. Thus, the three of them established three sects together. Among them, the sects established by Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang were human sections. One was a martial arts sect, while the other was a cultivation sect. What Yuan Lei had established, however, was a non-human sect. The disciples of the sect were all non-human demonic beings, and their cultivation was neither martial arts nor cultivation. Instead, it was a kind of demonic cultivation that was somewhere between martial arts and cultivation. It was also quite mysterious, and once cultivated, it could trigger heavenly tribulations and ascend. Although the three sects did not impart the various divine abilities that Luo Fan had imparted to them. However, the three of them were post-celestial living beings whose aptitudes were only slightly lower than that of innate God. Moreover, Luo Fu had already cultivated to the primordial reversion realm and obtained an initial innate body and innate spirit. He could almost be regarded as an innate God. Therefore, it was extremely easy for them to learn the martial arts and cultivation methods of this world, or to create similar cultivation method. As a result, it only took a few decades for their cultivation and martial arts to surpass all the living beings in this lesser kiliacosm. It was naturally enough for them to establish their own sects and spread their martial arts and the Daos of Taoism and Taoism. After thousands of years of development, the three great sects had already become colossal existences. They became the three supreme sects in this minor thousand world. Among them, Luo Fu had established the Dan Yuan school, Luo Chunyang had established the Sun Transformation school, and Yuan Lei had established the demonic Tao. The three sects ruled the cultivation world of the entire minor thousand world, and the cultivators who ascended from them accounted for more than 80% of the living beings who ascended or broke through the void in the past thousands of years. It could be said that the results were so remarkable that even Luo Fan couldn't help but gasp in surprise. If that was all, Luo Fan would be surprised, but he wouldn't be unsure whether to laugh or cry. What really made him unsure whether to laugh or cry was that after so many years in this minor thousand world, Luo Chunyang had left tens of thousands of years earlier than Luo Fu. Because he was no longer under control, he had gotten married and had children in this minor thousand world. Now, he even had more than 300 generations of descendants, forming a huge clan with millions of people. I didn't think that I would have millions of descendants before I knew it. Luo Fan smiled bitterly. Although this minor thousand world was important to Luo Fan, it was only important to the minor thousand world itself. He didn't care what kind of society and living conditions the living beings on this continent were living in. Therefore, he didn't care about Luo Fu and the others messing around in this minor thousand world. Instead, he found it quite interesting. Therefore, although he didn't know whether to laugh or cry right now, he just smiled it off. With a thought, he took a step forward and teleported through the void, arriving in front of Dang Ling Ju Peak Hall. A thought flashed through their minds, and a sentence reverberated in the minds of Luo Fu and the other two. Why aren't the three of you coming to the Great Palace? Do you want me to see you in person? At this moment, Luo Fu was sitting on his throne, giving a lecture to his direct disciples. Luo Chunyang was enjoying the company of his family with his children. Thunder Ape was teaching a lesson to a few demons in human form. When they suddenly heard this voice in their minds, they were a little confused. After a while, the three of them woke up at the same time. This was the long-awaited voice of Luo Fan. They couldn't help but be overjoyed. To Thunder Ape, he had the authority to enter and exit the minor thousand world at will. If he got bored of the minor thousand world, he could directly leave and cultivate in isolation in Buzhou Mountain. After a few years, the minor thousand world would become fresh and new again. Therefore, even though more than a yuanhui had passed in the minor thousand world, his own experience was at most tens of thousands of years. It wasn't considered a long time. Therefore, even though he missed Luo Fan, he didn't think too much about it. However, it was different for Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang. Luo Fan originally wanted to give them a world to travel in and a place to cultivate. Naturally, he didn't give them the authority to enter and exit the minor thousand world at will. During this period of more than a yuanhui, they had endured it. Today, the two of them missed Luo Fan to the point of insanity. Under such circumstances, even though Luo Chunyang was the furthest away from the top hall, he was the first to arrive at the top hall and meet Luo Fan. Then, it was Luo Fu who was the second furthest away, followed by Thunder Ape who was the closest. Luo Chunyang rode the jade toad-shaped magic weapon that Luo Fan had given him and quickly landed in front of Luo Fan. With red eyes, he kowtowed and said, "May Grandpa live a long life." He had been a grandmaster for such a long time that he had already developed a general trend. At this time, even though he was kowtowing, his voice was choked with sobs, and his eyes were a little red, but he was no longer as weak as before. Instead, he strangely showed an indescribable majesty. Seeing Luo Chunyang's performance, Luo Fan secretly nodded in his heart. Even though Luo Chunyang's change didn't seem to be as close and admiring as before, it represented his growth. Naturally, it was worth being happy about. "Get up. Let me see how your cultivation is going." Luo Fan smiled and helped Luo Chunyang up. "Not bad, not bad. The divine fire is strong. Even though you haven't reached the Khanate door, it's still quite effective. You haven't been slacking off." Luo Fan took a closer look and praised. "Grandpa, you're too kind. My progress is still too slow. I just hope I won't disappoint Grandpa," Luo Chunyang said, a little ashamed. At this moment, Luo Fu, who was the second to arrive, turned into a rainbow and landed in front of the top hall. At the reversion realm, Luo Fu could already turn into a rainbow. Even though his speed wasn't 10,000th of Luo Fan's, it was still quite fast. When he arrived, Luo Fu directly kowtowed. "Greetings, Father. May you live a long life, Father." "Good, good, good. Get up. You've done well. Now that you've achieved the Khanate body and Khanate spirit, you can be considered to be on the right path of cultivation." Luo Fan helped Luo Fu up and smiled. When Luo Chunyang saw Luo Fu, he naturally didn't dare to slight him. He hurriedly bowed and greeted him, but he didn't mention it. The three chatted for a while. Just then, they saw Thunder Ape leisurely riding a cloud-shaped Dharma artifact from the sky. As a postnatal living being who cultivated the pattern reversion technique, he couldn't fly without cultivating the immortal body. However, he didn't waste his time in this spirit space. He used the cultivation method of this spirit space to refine a flying Dharma artifact instead of walking. Although this Dharma artifact was far inferior to any Dharma artifact that Luo Fan had refined, at least it gave Thunder Ape the ability to fly. Thunder Ape pressed the Dharma artifact and came in front of Luo Fan. He bowed and said, "Greetings, Uncle Luo." "Greetings, Uncle Luo." Luo Fan smiled and said, "You don't have to be so polite. Your father and mother and I are very close friends. I've been busy all these years and neglected you. I'm really ashamed." "Uncle Luo, what are you talking about? Uncle Luo, you're willing to open such a wonderful world for me to travel. Thunder Ape has long been ashamed to accept it. How dare I ask for more?" Thunder Ape hurriedly said. Thunder Ape and Luo Fan rarely met, so he wasn't very familiar with Luo Fan, so he was a little nervous. Luo Fan saw through Thunder Ape's thoughts. He smiled and didn't care. He said, "You're Chunyang's elder. You should take good care of Chunyang in the future." "Well." Thunder Ape's face turned red when he heard Luo Fan's words. "Thunder Ape will work hard to cultivate. I won't let you down." Chapter 276. separate the mysteries and refine the stars. Although Ape-lay was the son of two innate deities, he was a postnatal creature with excellent aptitude for cultivation. It could even be said that there was not much difference between him and an ordinary innate deity. This could be seen from Ape-lay's first practice of the pattern ancestral technique. At that time, it only took him 9 days to reach the core formation realm. How amazing was that! How much people looked forward to it. However, unexpectedly, Ape-lay did not work hard in the following practice. It could even be said that he was quite lazy. If it was someone else who had the excellent conditions that Luo Fan had given him now, to have more than 700 times the time and be able to travel between the two worlds at will, then they would definitely think that this period of time was too short. They would definitely wish that they could cultivate in this spirit space for a few more hours a day. How could they run out every 2 or 3 days like him? God knows how many tens of thousands of years had passed in this spirit space, but the time he had experienced was only tens of thousands of years. His cultivation was still in the exceptional core formation realm, which was only a little better than when he had finished his core formation 9 days ago. Among the 3 people present, he had the highest aptitude and the longest cultivation time, if he had been in the spirit space all these years, but he was also the weakest one. This was really a waste of his natural aptitude. Luo Fan had promised to take care of Ape-lay in front of Yuan Tong and his wife. If Ape-lay's cultivation was too poor in the future, it would not be too justifiable. That was why he pointed him out just now. However, after all, he was not Ape-lay's master, so he could not be too harsh on him. After pointing him out, he let go of Ape-lay and began to ask about the 3's cultivation state and the difficulties they had encountered in cultivation over the years. The Great Way was boundless. No matter how hard a practitioner worked or how high his aptitude was, he would inevitably encounter incomprehensible problems in the process of cultivation. Even Luo Fan was no exception, let alone the 3 of them. Hearing Luo Fan's question, how could they be polite to Luo Fan? At the entrance of the Ling Ju Hall, in front of the stone table that Luo Fan had built for his meeting with Rahu, each of them asked Luo Fan all sorts of questions that they had encountered over the years. To them, these problems were problems that they could not solve no matter how long they thought about it. But to Luo Fan, it was as easy as reading the lines on his palm. This series of questions and answers lasted for a full 3 years before it stopped. Over the past 3 years, Luo Fan had directly revealed the essence of the art of returning to the spirit that the 3 of them had been cultivating. Unknowingly, the 3 of them, who only knew how but did not know why, had gained a deep understanding of the essence of the art of returning to the spirit. They had gradually understood the root of the cultivation method they had been cultivating. Although they were limited by their cultivation realm, and could not create a cultivation method that could allow the art of returning to the spirit, as long as their cultivation realm deepened in the future, there would be a day when they could completely absorb the principles that Luo Fan had explained in a short period of time and casually create a cultivation method that could allow the art of returning to the spirit. Of course, that would at least require Luo Fu, Luo Chunyang, and the others to attain the Tao fruit, while Ape-lay would barely be able to cultivate to the undying realm. According to their current cultivation speed, it would take tens of thousands of years. After Luo Fan had explained the last question of how to nourish the innate body and innate soul after breaking through the innate door, although the cultivation realm of Luo Fu and the other 2 had not improved much, they had seen their path forward more clearly. The confusion on the path of cultivation had lessened a lot, and their confidence in cultivation was much firmer. Now you have no more doubts. Do you want to continue cultivating in this spirit space, or return to the untainted land? You can choose for yourselves. Luo Fan asked with a smile when he saw that the 3 of them had come to a sudden realization. I am willing to continue cultivating in this world. Ape-lay had been enlightened by Luo Fan's words 3 years ago, so he was the first to say this. Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang both hesitated for a while. In the end, Luo Fu was the first to say, It is difficult for me to make any progress in this spirit space. I am willing to return to the untainted land. I am also willing to return to the untainted land. Luo Chunyang followed. Luo Fan nodded, feeling quite satisfied in his heart. The three of them had made the best arrangement in Luo Fan's mind. It seemed that the three of them had an accurate and wise understanding of him. Therefore, he raised his hand and pointed. A ray of spiritual light fell from the sky and instantly rushed into Luo Chunyang's body. This is a light of authority to enter and exit the spirit space. You have already spread your roots in this world, so you can come here often in the future. While Luo Chunyang was pleasantly surprised, he continued, however, in order to let you concentrate on cultivating, I have added a restriction to this light of authority. You can only enter the untainted land once a year. Well, unless millions of people summon you. Ah, Grandpa, isn't 1 year equivalent to more than 730 years in this world? That's dozens of generations. It's a bit long, a bit long. Why don't you go once a month? Luo Chunyang couldn't help but scream. It's good enough to give you this opportunity. You got married without reporting to your elders and gave birth to so many descendants for me. I am already spoiling you by not punishing you. How dare you ask for more? Are you asking for a lesson? Luo Fu slapped the back of Luo Chunyang's head and shouted. But when love comes, no one can stop it. Luo Chunyang couldn't help but feel wronged. At this moment, he didn't have the power of a master of a sect. He was completely a junior who was listening to his elders. You still dare to talk back? Have you grown up? Luo Fu was even angrier when he heard this. Okay. You're already a master of a sect. Why are you still making trouble like this? Luo Fan laughed and scolded him. He quite liked this kind of atmosphere because it made him feel the warmth of a family. As for wanting to see his granddaughter-in-law, Luo Fan would never say it, because the woman Luo Chunyang found had extremely poor aptitude. Even if Luo Chunyang exhausted all his efforts, he couldn't cultivate to the realm where he could break through the limit of his lifespan. Many years ago, after Luo Chunyang found all the treasures that could prolong his lifespan, she died, yes. Since Luo Fan had already spoken, Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang naturally didn't dare to continue talking. I've opened up a secret cultivation room for you in Danglingju Hall. You can cultivate in it. Luo Fan turned to the envious Yuan Lei standing on the side and said, Thank you, Uncle Luo. Yuan Lei quickly bowed and thanked him. Luo Fan nodded, and a yellow-turbaned strongman came up to receive Yuan Lei. Then, he raised his hand and tore the space in front of him. After the distortion, a simple and unadorned door appeared in front of him. There was a strong and unyielding aura coming out of this door. There was also a faint influx of chaotic vitality. Luo Fan nodded to Yuan Lei and stepped through the door with Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang. As if passing through endless time and space, they arrived in front of the Seeker Cave at the top of Buzhou Mountain in the blink of an eye. After the three of them entered the gate slowly faded and then completely disappeared, as if it had never been there in the first place. The yellow-turbaned strongman, who was summoned by Luo Fan, dutifully led Yuan Lei to the secret cultivation room that Luo Fan had set up in Danglingju Hall. Yuan Lei had made up his mind at this time to not come out until he ignited the divine fire. He directly waved the yellow-turbaned strongman away, turned his body, and transformed into the original body of the water and earth azure ape. He sat cross-legged and began to practice the mantra and route of the pattern ancestral scripture. Through Luo Fan's previous explanation, Yuan Lei had a deep understanding of the principle of this scripture. He believed that his current state had reached the peak of cultivation. If he used all his energy to break through to the Dan completion realm, the possibility of success was very high. He might even be able to break through in a few hundred years. The reason why he was so lazy in the past was that he had stayed in the Dan completion realm for too long. No matter how he cultivated, no matter how hard he tried, there was no change in his Yuan Dan. Although Yuan Lei had been born for tens of thousands of years, his mind was still that of a young baby. It was an unbearable blow for him. As a result, he had unknowingly become lazy and slack off. At this time, he had already seen the hope of breaking through. His heart to pursue strength naturally erupted again, and the fighting spirit in his heart burned. Even the yellow-turbaned strongman was intimidated by the heavenly aura he exuded after Luo Fan took Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang out of the mini-kiliacosm. He directly raised his hand and waved. Endless chaotic chi quickly gathered. In the blink of an eye, it had gathered into a magic cloud of 1 acre under his feet. Then, with a thought, the cloud that was about an acre in size abruptly trembled and flew up, carrying the 3 of them as a streak of mysterious light as they flew down. I set up a space-time illusion below. There are many innate deities in it. You too can also live in this space-time illusion for a period of time and gain some knowledge. Luo Fan said to Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang. Innate deities? How many? Luo Chunyang asked curiously. After spending more time with Luo Fan and Luo Fu, he gradually showed a performance that was suitable for his age. Luo Fan smiled slightly. At least a few hundred. I didn't count, but it will definitely be an eye-opener for you. A few hundred. Luo Chunyang was surprised. On the side, Luo Fu was quite steady, but he just listened quietly. While they were talking, the magic cloud Luo Fan was riding had crossed a distance of nearly 100,000 miles and arrived at the foot of Buzhou Mountain, in front of the valley with the space-time illusion. The doppelganger celestial device, sitting at the entrance of the valley, suddenly opened its eyes and looked up at the magic cloud that was descending from the sky. The magic cloud stopped at the entrance of the valley. When it disappeared, the doppelganger celestial device stood up and said with a smile, "Welcome to the space-time illusion. Is this the legendary outer body incarnation?" Luo Chunyang looked at the doppelganger celestial device in a grayish-brown robe and could not help but feel excited. No, I'm just a doppelganger celestial device. It's very different from the outer body protector, which can be improved with the improvement of one's cultivation, the doppelganger celestial device said with a smile. This celestial device will stay here from now on. Although it's just a celestial device, it has my consciousness. If you need anything, you can contact me through it, Luo Fan said with a smile, standing between Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang. Yes, Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang nodded, but they did not dare to look at the doppelganger celestial device with curiosity. Luo Fan had said that the doppelganger celestial device had his consciousness, which was equivalent to their grandfather or father. How could they look at it with such presumptuous eyes? Well, now I'll hand you over to the doppelganger celestial device. It will take you to the illusion to meet those innate deities, lest they ignore you. Luo Fan patted their backs and said. With that said, he couldn't be bothered with how the 2 of them tried to persuade him to stay. His body shuddered, and he transformed into a streak of azure light that shot up into the sky. In just a short while, he had already traversed a distance of 50,000 kilometers and arrived in front of the Seeking Through cave at the summit of Mount Buzhou. The streak of azure light condensed, and his body descended, materializing in front of the Seeking Through cave. After Luo Fan left, the doppelganger celestial device said to Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang, "You too come with me. The time in the illusion passes 10 times faster than in the untainted land. Although it's not very fast, it's quite rare. If you don't know the way to enter, you won't be able to enter unless you have attained the Tao fruit." Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang were still in a daze because of Luo Fan's sudden departure. Suddenly, they found that the doppelganger celestial device in front of them looked exactly like Luo Fan. Hearing Luo Fan's tone, they could not help but feel a little ridiculous and confused. After a long while, they came to their senses and hurriedly bowed in response. The doppelganger celestial device smiled slightly and raised its hand to wave gently. The space-time illusion in front of it suddenly opened a door. Flowing lights flickered inside the door, like the legendary time tunnel. The doppelganger celestial device pulled Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang toward the door without hesitation. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared into it. Ja! Luo Fan let out a soft shout. After this shout left his mouth, it instantly turned into endless thunder and lightning, condensing the endless chaotic vital energy in the void and transforming it into all sorts of indescribable energy. The energy wriggled and swirled like flood dragons. As the countless flood dragons wriggled and swirled, they quickly combined. In a short while, they had already combined into an indescribable array formation. This array formation came from the star scroll of the Tao fruit and Tao scripture. It was a kind of array formation that could form a mysterious reflection with the endless starry sky above the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer. Luo Fan stood proudly in front of the search cave. In front of him was a ball of mysterious light that was differentiated by some kind of color. This light was 1,000 feet in radius. At first glance, it seemed to be a very simple kind of light. But if one looked closely, or if one had a pair of gold and silver eyes like Luo Fan's, they would be able to discover that this light contained a universe. These rays of light condensed into countless strange lines within the light according to some unimaginable method. These strange lines wriggled and swirled, constantly outlining and entangling with each other. It looked like a sky full of stars. After carefully examining this ball of light for a long time, Luo Fan nodded in satisfaction. He raised his hand and clapped. This ball of light instantly expanded. A gust of wind suddenly flashed around him. An endless amount of chaotic energy gathered towards the ball of light, constantly surging into it to replenish the emptiness caused by the expansion of the light. Although the light continued to expand, it did not become thinner at all. Instead, the energy became more and more abundant and more condensed. After a while, this light had already expanded to a ball of light that was 100 miles in radius. As for its substance, it had already grown to the point where it was like a solid object. It was mysterious and wonderful beyond words. At this moment, a mysterious change suddenly flashed in the endless starry sky that was less than 1,000 miles away. As if some inanimate object had been activated, the starlight in the endless starry sky flickered one after another. From the top of this position, it spread in all directions, spreading towards the endless stars in the starry sky. In the blink of an eye, it had already flowed through the endless starry sky. Countless stars in the sky radiated light that was 100 times brighter than before. With this change, an unknown number of billions of strands of star essence appeared out of thin air. Like moths flying into a flame, they flew into this seemingly solid ball of light that was 100 miles in radius. Then, within this ball of light, all sorts of incredible, indescribable changes occurred. The indescribable ball of light that gave people a feeling that it was solid instantly became solid. A ball of light with a diameter of 100 miles appeared in front of Luo Fan. This ball was completely jet black, but it was dotted with countless starlight. It appeared incomparably deep and serene, as if it contained an incomparably vast and all-encompassing universe. Luo Fan stood there quietly, a faint expression on his face. His mind and consciousness were constantly flashing with endless light. For him, every time he refined something, whether it was a magic tool, a formation, a magic treasure, or even a small ancient book that contained a cultivation method, it was an extremely novel process of creation. It made him feel like he was communicating with some kind of invisible great Tao, and that he was creating some kind of innovation from the endless divine abilities and techniques in his memory. That feeling was quite wonderful. It was the same for this object in front of him. Seeing that the huge black ball had already taken shape, Luo Fan stretched out his hand and pointed. A star that was 100 miles in size rushed out of his sleeve. After this star appeared, it gave off a powerful and strange pressure. This pressure was different from the pressure produced by the void suppression at the top of Buzhou Mountain. It was not a pressure on the body or the soul, but a stagnation. It caused the mind and the soul to become sluggish, slow, and calm. Under this light, a faint expression appeared on Luo Fan's face. He raised his hand and pointed. The star suddenly rushed out and overlapped with the black ball that was 100 miles in size. As the two overlapped, a mysterious aura spread out from it. Chapter 277. Starry Hasek, a guest from outer space. After such a magical change, the cosmos-like, enormous black ball gradually glowed with a sky-blue light. After the sky-blue light faded, the dark blue ball began to compress rapidly under the effect of an incomparably great power. Within a blink of an eye, it had shrunk into a tiny hasek from 100 miles in diameter. At the same time the cushion gave off a very strange pressure. The power of the stars in the universe condensed into one, forming a strange domain that suddenly covered an area of 100 feet around the cushion. Within this area of 30 m, it was like a world that existed independently from the primordial times, and it contained boundless essence of the stars and chaotic origin energy. In a magical way, the star power was dispersed in the upper half of the sphere in a gaseous form. The chaotic power was condensed into a liquid-like substance, piling up in the lower half of the hasek like an ocean. Because of this, the hasek seemed to be floating above this 30-meter-wide, hemispherical gray ocean. It was also like this hasek had formed a world of ocean. In this case you shall be called Starry Hasek, said Luo Fan while looking at the thing in front of him, raising his hand and waving it. As he waved his hand, the hasek instantly emitted a dazzling light. After the light faded, all the abnormalities disappeared. The things around the star praying mat had completely disappeared. The praying mat had become extremely simple and ordinary. It looked like the most ordinary praying mat woven from hay, quietly floating in front of Luo Fan. Luo Fan raised his hand and slightly waved. Following his move, the hasek flew into his hand. With a thought, Luo Fan sensed that this hasek not only had the ability to calm the mind like that star, it also had the ability to gather chaotic power and reflect the starry sky. Sitting on this hasek, no matter where he was, in a small world, a primitive world, a medium-sized world, or even in the blood-red world generated from Pan Gu's spirit blood, he would be able to connect with the starry void of this universe. He could cultivate with the help of the boundless starry sky, temper his body, temper his soul, and comprehend the mysteries of heaven and earth contained within. It was even to the extent that if he was willing, he could even rely on this meditation cushion to set up a grand astral formation. This formation could simulate an endless starry sky, and when the enemy was sucked into this endless starry sky, it would be like being sucked into a world completely under Luo Fan's control, giving him an overwhelming advantage. Unfortunately, although this method was strong, it was nothing for Luo Fan who already had a mini-kiliocosm. The mini-kiliocosm could be done more thoroughly, and the control would be stronger, and the advantages would be greater. Therefore, from Luo Fan's point of view, the star futon was only a magic item that assisted in cultivation. He gently raised his left hand and abruptly opened the universe in his sleeve. This star futon, which could assist in both attacking and cultivation, went into his universe in his sleeve. With a thought, Ji Hao took a step forward, intending to step into the mini-kiliocosm inside the Wuji Palace. At this moment, a thought was transmitted from the void to Luo Fan's mind, preventing him from continuing to cross over. Luo Fan's mind turned and understood the information contained in this thought. The expression on his face couldn't help but change slightly. The source of this thought was none other than the Sky Watcher boy, who had been missing for a long time, and even Luo Fan himself hadn't thought of him for a long time. Along with this thought, a simple bronze mirror with a gray flame pattern on its back suddenly appeared in front of Luo Fan out of thin air. The front of this bronze mirror was like an incomparably deep whirlpool. There seemed to be nothing in it, but it also seemed to contain a complete world. Master, 3 moments ago, a portal was opened. It originated from an unknown place outside the chaotic wasteland, and its destination is a place 313, 98,723 kilometers away from here. Sky Watcher Boy's voice came from the bronze mirror, which was very calm and hazy. More than 300 billion miles. Luo Fan was shocked. When Luo Fan was refining the heaven-observing mirror, he had already set it up. The heaven-observing mirror completely sacrificed all its defensive and offensive abilities, and greatly strengthened its monitoring ability, so that it could detect the abnormal changes in the space-time of the entire untainted land. Therefore, he wasn't surprised that Sky Watcher Boy could sense the changes in the position more than 300 billion miles away. However, the distance was really too far. It was so far that even he needed more than 10 days to reach it. With a slight thought, he raised his hand and waved. Countless lights and shadows appeared in the Sky Watcher mirror. These lights and shadows changed rapidly. The scene was like a scene shot by a camera that was hundreds of thousands of times faster than the speed of sound. If it weren't for Luo Fan's dynamic vision that almost surpassed everything and the ability to see through the origin, he probably wouldn't have discovered the scene displayed in the light and shadows. These lights and shadows continued to spread from Buzhou Mountain in one direction. Along the way, they also reflected countless terrains and environments that Luo Fan was familiar with. There were even many places that Luo Fan had stopped at before. After a while, the light and shadow stopped, and what appeared was a valley that was neither too big nor too small. In this valley, there was a metal door that was about 3 meters tall suspended in midair. This metal door looked very strange. It was impossible to tell what kind of metal it was made of. Countless mysterious and indescribable images were carved on the door. These patterns were extremely abstract. No matter how Luo Fan looked at them, he couldn't tell what they meant. Even with the superpower of the great sun golden eyes and bright moon silver eyes, he couldn't see what secrets were hidden behind these patterns. This must be an item from outside the untainted land. Luo Fan felt the hazy thought that was transmitted into his eyes. He instantly had this thought. Only an item from outside the untainted land would the great sun golden eyes and bright moon silver eyes lose their powerful power. Only then would they be like this, unable to see through any secrets. In front of this door, there stood a creature that was roughly humanoid but completely blue. It was 3 meters tall and had only 4 fingers on both hands. It was extremely strong. This creature emitted a very powerful aura that was equivalent to that of a Taoist creature. There were even traces of lightning appearing around its body. At this moment, this creature was looking around. Its face seemed to be filled with shock, as if it had seen something unbelievable. This kind of heavenly demon seems to be completely different from the ones I've seen before. It seems to be more intelligent. This thought suddenly flashed through Luo Fan's mind. As long as it was an extraterrestrial creature, to Luo Fan, it was a heavenly demon. To those extraterrestrial creatures, these connate gods of the untainted land were probably also heavenly demons. This was determined by their standpoint and had nothing to do with anything else. After such a thought appeared in his mind, Luo Fan observed more carefully. After a while, he discovered that although this creature looked naked, its body was actually wrapped in a very strange layer of shield or armor that seemed to be created by some kind of sci-fi combination of cultivation. Those electric arcs seemed to be the power contained in the armor itself. Suddenly, this creature seemed to have sensed something. It suddenly raised its eyes and looked at the angle that Luo Fan was looking at. It seemed to be looking at Luo Fan through the sky observation mirror. A vigilant expression appeared on its face, and it uttered a large number of words that Luo Fan could not understand. Luo Fan's heart moved slightly. His mind automatically activated and analyzed the thoughts contained in the word. In the blink of an eye, he understood what this creature was saying. "Who is spying on me?" This was the creature's words. It can actually feel the perception of the sky observation boy. It's not simple. Such thoughts flashed through Luo Fan's mind. Thinking about this, he raised his hand and opened it. An illusory door that was between real and fake appeared in front of him. Then, he raised his hand and pointed. A speck of spiritual light suddenly rushed out from his hand and went straight into the illusory door. After a long while, in this valley, when the creature's expression was changing from impatient to impatient, a door that was also between real and fake appeared in front of this creature. As the gate opened, a speck of light flew out from the gate and landed in front of the being. An extremely powerful suction force erupted from the speck of light, sucking in the boundless connate origin chi, baleful chi, star essence chi, as well as the great sun essence and solar true fire that were descending from the sky. Through some kind of mysterious change, it was gradually compressed, and finally condensed into a living Luo Fan in front of this creature. That location was 313,098,723 kilometers away from Buzhou Mountain. If Luo Fan wanted to use the illusory world and the ability to turn fake into real to cross this distance, he could indeed do it, and the speed would definitely be very fast. He could reach it in the blink of an eye. However, the consumption of magic power and mental energy would definitely be unimaginable. Even if he didn't empty Luo Fan, he would definitely not have much strength left. In that case, if that creature had evil intentions, his real body would be useless no matter where he went, but now that he sent a bit of his consciousness there, it was different. With the guidance of the power of the sky observation boy, coupled with the fact that this consciousness was an existence between real and fake, it was the same nature as the illusory door from a certain point of view. Crossing this illusory door would naturally consume the least amount of power. In addition, although it was only a bit of consciousness that was sent over, the real body that was condensed with energy also had 100% of Luo Fan's power. It was more than enough to deal with a person who had just cultivated immortality. Under such conditions, Luo Fan naturally wouldn't choose to cross it with his real body. Instead, he chose to cross it with his consciousness. After the consciousness absorbed all kinds of energy and condensed Luo Fan's body, Luo Fan felt that he had an extra body. He felt as if he could go to the valley that was more than 300 billion kilometers away at any time. Knowing that the consciousness incarnation could work normally, he secretly heaved a sigh of relief. It was the first time he used the consciousness incarnation across such a long distance. He was rather perturbed. He was worried that the consciousness incarnation would be affected by the long distance. After the incarnation was formed, his real body in front of the sky-seeking cave raised his hand slightly and waved, dispersing the image in the sky observation mirror. He said to the sky observation boy in the sky observation mirror, "I already know about this. Continue to monitor the untainted land. If there's any abnormality, inform me immediately." Yes. The sky observation boy's voice continued coming from the mirror. Then, the mirror rippled and slowly disappeared in front of Luo Fan, gradually hiding in the void. At this point, Luo Fan took a step forward and arrived at the depths of the seeking cave. He raised his hand and released the star praying mat he had just refined. He sat cross-legged on the star praying mat and stimulated it, causing it to form the shape of a hemispherical pond supporting the praying mat. Then, he sat cross-legged on the meditation cushion and slowly closed his eyes. He extracted his consciousness from his real body and attached it to the consciousness incarnation in the Valley 313,098,723 kilometers away. When Luo Fan sensed the consciousness incarnation, he heard a bunch of voices surging into his eardrums. "Are you the one who's spying on me? What ability did you use to spy on me just now? I actually didn't discover your location. Also, are you the life of this world? The spiritual chi in this world is so rich, and it's all such pure connate vitality." With a slight thought, Luo Fan knew that the creature could no longer hold back its curiosity after absorbing the energy he had sent out to condense its body. Thus, it asked a series of questions in a series of rapid bursts. To be able to ask such questions, it seems like it has a different goal from the vast freedom demon lord. This thought flashed through Luo Fan's mind. The language used by that creature was still a language that Luo Fan did not know. But after the previous analysis, Luo Fan had already been able to easily integrate the thoughts contained in this language into his own perception. Through sensing the consciousness, he could easily understand what the creature was saying. "You've asked so many questions, I wonder which one should I answer first?" Luo Fan smiled slightly and said. The way he spoke was not the usual way of speaking. Instead, he added his strongest consciousness to the voice, so that any ordinary creature could perceive this consciousness and understand what he was saying through this consciousness, regardless of whether they understood the language spoken by Luo Fan or not. The creature's perception was quite keen and could naturally perceive more information. With a look of surprise and shock on his face, he completely let go of the doubts in his heart and said, "How can you stretch and magnify your consciousness to this extent? Is this the ability of the creatures in this world? In our world, one must reach the starry sky grade 9 to achieve this." What Luo Fan heard was not the language, but the consciousness. Therefore, when this person mentioned the starry sky grade 9, he perceived through the consciousness contained in it that the starry sky grade 9 was a level equivalent to the peak of the earthly immortal Tao fruit realm in the world of creatures. He also understood how the world of living beings divided their strength into different levels. Starry sky, earth, mortals. This was the classification of strength in that world from top to bottom. Among them, each stage was divided into 9 levels. After the mortal grade 9, through some understanding, one could break through the barrier between man and earth and reach the earth grade 1. After the earth grade 9, one could continue to understand and break through the limit of the earth and space, and reach the starry sky grade 1. The starry sky grade 9 was the highest level in that world, a legendary existence. It was theoretically possible, but no living creature had ever reached this level. Breaking through the starry sky grade 1 was equivalent to condensing the primordial spirit, condensing the talisman spirit, and attaining the Tao fruit. At that time, any living creature could have an immortal life and obtain the ability to fly in the sky and the earth. According to the strength analysis in this consciousness, Luo Fan knew that the creature in front of him was the starry sky grade 3, which was the strongest existence that had appeared in that world for hundreds of millions of years. The transmission of thoughts was profound and indescribably wondrous. The creature's control of the consciousness was very rough. Although it was only the 4 words, starry sky grade 9, but because these 4 words stimulated him greatly, it contained a huge amount of consciousness. Unexpectedly, Luo Fan roughly knew the strength level of that world through these 4 words. That world is actually at a higher level than his free transformation heaven. Luo Fan was shocked. The legend of the starry sky grade 9 was naturally not groundless. There must be some living creatures that were close to or even reached this level, but had disappeared in the long years of ancient times. This was much higher than his free transformation heaven, which at most had an existence like the vast heavenly demon lord. Although not all living creatures have this ability, it is almost the same. The innate gods in the untainted land only need a little training to have this ability. With that idea in mind, Luo Fan decided to rope in this world and said first, "This must be the legendary immortal world. Only the immortal world could have such pure innate essence chi. Only the living creatures born in the immortal world could have this incredible ability." The creature was stunned for a long time before it murmured. Luo Fan frowned, and a faint shadow shrouded his mind. Even the untainted land had a legend in that world. Could it be that a living creature from that world had ascended to the untainted land? If so, the situation was probably more troublesome than the invasion of his free transformation heaven. After all, the cultivation conditions in the untainted land were too superior. According to the general conditions, the living creatures that could ascend to the untainted land must at least be of the starry sky grade. It was even more likely that they were above the starry sky grade 3. This was equivalent to the realm of true immortals. It could be regarded as the most powerful existence in the untainted land apart from himself that Luo Fan knew. What level has this person's cultivation reached now? In the end, did he intentionally hide, or did he not encounter me? Luo Fan's mind flashed with thoughts. Unfilial descendant contains thunder? Azura kowtows to the spirits of my ancestors in heaven. I have spent 300,000 years, abandoned everything, searched hard, and traveled through the 3,000 worlds. Finally, I have found the legendary immortal world. I have finally proved that the hundreds of millions of years of hard work of my Azura family was not a fantasy. In this infinite space-time, there really is a immortal world. The strange creature directly knelt on the ground, tears streaming down his face. Although the language he used was strange, his voice was extremely hoarse, as if he had exhausted all his mental strength to spit out these words. At this time, his mood was extremely agitated, and his control of his mind was naturally coarser. Naturally, the thoughts revealed in the words were more, and the information Luo Fan obtained was naturally more. So that's how it is. Perceiving the information revealed in these thoughts, a look of enlightenment appeared in Luo Fan's eyes. When the strange creature knelt on the ground and kowtowed and prayed, Luo Fan seemed to see countless lights and shadows flashing in front of him through his thoughts. These lights and shadows contained infinite vicissitudes of life. It was unknown how many generations of a family had spent hundreds of millions of years trying to find the ethereal spacetime. Chapter 278. The 36 Forbidden Lands. After a long while, the blue creature gradually calmed down. At this moment, the door behind the creature suddenly disappeared in an extremely natural manner. The way it disappeared made it impossible for anyone to find any abnormality, and no one could tell that there was any power at work. It was like a falling leaf floating down, like water flowing from a high place to a low place, like the sun shining on the earth, like the stars shining in the sky, like the clouds floating in the sky. Luo Fan frowned and thought to himself that it was a pity. He knew that the reason why the metal door disappeared was because the natural Tao of the primordial world did not allow a door of time that led from the outer realm to exist for a long time. This was the use of space in the primordial world. It was different from any magical power or power. Its mysteriousness could not be described with words. The creature seemed to sense something and suddenly turned its head to look. There was shock and anxiety on its face, but there was also a hint of understanding. No! It shouted and suddenly pounced towards the door of time and space. In the end, it passed through the metal door without touching anything at all. It was as if the metal door was just an illusion. The creature opened its arms and waved around the metal door. Unfortunately, the result of its actions was only an illusion. It could not catch the metal door that was disappearing naturally. It did not even touch anything. Luo Fan shook his head and sighed. This is the restriction of the great Tao of the primordial world. If one does not understand the mysteries of the great Tao of the primordial world, it is impossible to maintain such a door of time and space. He looked at the door with some pity. He was quite curious about the world of this living creature, because it was obvious that the world had a history of billions of years. The speed at which time passed was countless times faster than the primordial world. Moreover, there was such a strange sci-fi creation. It was obvious that it had developed a civilization that was similar to a technological civilization. That was very attractive to him. Unfortunately, even he was unable to maintain this door. After all, although he had a better understanding of the mysteries of the great Tao of the primordial world than almost everyone else, he did not understand the mysteries of space in that world at all. It could be said that he was completely powerless. Then, doesn't that mean I can't go back? The creature stood there in a daze, not daring to call itself the main body anymore. Get over it. Luo Fan sighed. I am Yunlei? Azura. How should I address you, sir? After a while, the creature asked Luo Fan. Luo Fan. Welcome to the primordial world. Luo Fan smiled faintly. He couldn't help but feel a strange sense of familiarity when he heard the term Mr. So you call this world the Great Desolation? That's quite accurate. Azura nodded, bowed to Luo Fan and said, I come from the netherworld, and I've just arrived. Now I'm trapped in the chaos immortal world, and I can no longer return to the netherworld. I'll leave the future to you. Luo Fan stared blankly for a moment, and then he couldn't help but laugh. This creature was straightforward enough, truly interesting. He waved his hand, and an auspicious cloud quickly gathered in his direction. In the blink of an eye, it had already formed an auspicious cloud the size of an acre in front of him. That was Yunlei? Azura's expression was one of shock, as if he found Luo Fan's actions unbelievable. I didn't expect the Chaos Immortal world to have such an amazing technique. I wonder if Mr. Luo Fan can teach me this technique? Yunlei? Azura asked directly. This technique is ordinary. If you stay in the Chaos Immortal world for a few years, you'll be able to understand this technique on your own. There's no need for any secret techniques, and there's nothing to teach. Luo Fan smiled. As their conversation increased, Luo Fan gradually became familiar with the language used by the Holy Spirit. Therefore, this sentence was spoken in the creature's extremely strange and difficult to pronounce language. Immortal world. Immortal world. Yunlei? Azura didn't insist, and a look of yearning appeared on his face. With such a beginning, this Yunlei? Azura also completely let go of the depression of not being able to return to his own world. The curiosity in his heart emerged again, and he directly revealed his questions. Facing such a creature that reminded him of a scientist on Earth, Luo Fan didn't hide anything. He told him everything he knew. Completely solve the problem of Yunlei? All the questions that Azura raised, including the questions he asked when he first saw Luo Fan. As Luo Fan explained, Azura realized that the figure in front of him was actually an incarnation of an idea, and Luo Fan had a powerful artifact that could monitor the Chaos Immortal world. Understanding this, he couldn't help but admire Luo Fan from the bottom of his heart. On the spot, he wanted to worship Luo Fan as his master and beg Luo Fan to teach him the great Tao of the Chaos Immortal world. Luo Fan smiled and shook his head, but he didn't agree. As they spoke, Luo Fan had already carried the Yunlei. Azura traveled hundreds of millions of kilometers and arrived at a mountain that he had seen previously. He pressed down on the cloud and carried the Yunlei. The Azura landed in front of a cave halfway up the mountain. This cave was filled with an incomparably dense and bizarre Thunder Yuan aura. This Thunder Yuan and Hidden Thunder? The power in Azura's body was quite similar, but it was of a higher level. Therefore, he was interested in the Yunlei. Azura had the most benefits and was the most suitable for him to cultivate. Azura would always find this position. Since he wanted to win him over, Luo Fan would naturally not hide this position. As expected, when he arrived at this location, the Yunlei, Azura was pleasantly surprised. He took a deep breath and said, "This is the Nine Heavens Thunder Essence, the purest Thunder Essence. As long as I have a small wisp, it's enough to transform the essence of the thunder in my body and increase my strength by more than 10 times. Luo Fan smiled and said, "In the untainted world, what you need to care about is the cultivation realm, but you don't need to worry about energy at all. It's absolutely difficult to find an existence like you in the untainted world whose energy is still of such a low level even though your cultivation realm has reached such a high level. In fact, with your ability, you should have turned the power in your body into the chaotic thunder essence. Unfortunately, your body is too weak and can't bear the infusion of the chaotic chi. It's really a pity." Chaotic thunder essence? This is the first wisp of thunder essence in the world. How could I not know how precious the chaotic thunder essence is? Unfortunately, in my world, all the things with the chaotic attribute have disappeared. No matter how strong I am, I can't use the chaotic attribute. Naturally, it's impossible to refine the energy into the chaotic thunder essence. Azura said to Luo Fan with a helpless look on his face. Haha. You don't need to worry when you reach the untainted world. The untainted world has just been established, and the chaotic chi is almost endless. It's a rare opportunity for you, Luo Fan said with a smile. Just as he said, the chaotic thunder essence? Azura's cultivation realm had reached the Tao realm equivalent to the primordial spirit, talisman divinity, and immortal body. However, the power in his body was of a low level. It was even far from the innate chi. He couldn't fully display the power of his cultivation realm. According to the power in his body, he couldn't even defeat Luo Fu. Fellow Taoist, you can cultivate here. After you refine the energy in your body into the nine heavens thunder essence, I can take you to another primal chaos essence source so that you can refine the energy into primal chaos essence, Luo Fan said with a smile. Thank you, Mr. Luo Fan. Azura hurriedly thanked him. Luo Fan shook his head and said, It's nothing. In fact, I have something to ask of you. I hope you can help me. Mr. Luo Fan, please speak. Azura's eyes flickered with realization when he heard that. I heard that you have traveled through the 3,000 worlds. Have you heard of the existence of the free transformation heaven and the supreme heart rotating heaven? Luo Fan asked. The free transformation heaven? The supreme heart rotating heaven? Chaotic thunder essence? Azura's expression changed. Where did Mr. Luo Fan hear of these two worlds? Luo Fan was delighted. He knew about the chaotic thunder essence? As expected, Azura had heard of the names of these two worlds. He hurriedly asked, I've met two foreign visitors before. One claimed to be from the free transformation heaven, and the other claimed to be from the supreme heart-turning heaven. Thus, I'm rather curious about these two worlds, which is why I asked. It's okay. If that's all, it's okay. What I'm most afraid of is that his Mahasvara transformation and supreme mind reversal heavens will invade the primitive immortal world. If that happens, the immortal world will suffer endless misfortune. It might even become another Mahasvara transformation or supreme mind reversal heavens. Azura heaved a sigh of relief. Why is that? Luo Fan asked. In my travels through the 3,000 worlds, I have heard a legend the most. Among the trillions of worlds in the universe, there were 36 forbidden areas that absolutely could not be touched. No matter what world it was, as long as it was related to one of the 36 heavens, it would definitely be destroyed and eventually assimilated by that world and absorbed. According to legend, even the immortal world is no exception. Azura said. So there are actually as many as 36 of these worlds. However, I wonder what are the names of these worlds? Luo Fan asked. I think it's better not to know about this. Whenever I think of those worlds, I feel my scalp tingle. Mr. Luo Fan, it's better not to ask about them. Azura said with some lingering fear. Luo Fan asked. Chaotic thunder essence? Azura was very determined. He refused to say the names of the 36 days. He didn't want to make things difficult for him, so he let the question go. Then he said, There is bad news. Now, the great Freedom Demon Master of Free Transformation Heaven is already in the untainted land. In 30,000 years, he will open a stable gate of time and space to his free transformation heaven. At that time, the endless freedom heavenly demons of his free transformation heaven will pour in through the gate of time and space to invade the untainted land. And the supreme heart rotating heaven also seems to have a heart demon sneaking into the untainted land. However, I don't know where it is or when it will act up. Hearing Luo Fan say this, chaotic thunder essence? Azura couldn't help but scream. Fellow Taoist, why are you so worried? The great wasteland world is different from other worlds. Other worlds can't resist the invasion of these two worlds, but that doesn't mean that the great wasteland world can't withstand it either. Luo Fan smiled and looked at the haggard Yun Lei, who was sitting at the edge of the thunder origin. Azura said, ever since he heard that the two worlds of free transformation heaven and the supreme heart rotating heaven intended to invade the untainted land, chaotic thunder essence, Azura had always been in such a state, looking extremely worried and desperate. Luo Fan waited for him to adjust himself for a while, but saw that his condition didn't improve at all. Instead, it became more and more unsightly. Finally, he couldn't help but say this. With such a temperament, it seems that I overestimated his cultivation level. Such a thought flashed through Luo Fan's mind. However, he also knew that this chaotic thunder essence, the cultivation method of the Azura world, was completely different from that of the untainted land. It only cultivated the realm, but not the cultivation level. It was understandable that his temperament was worse than the real living beings of the untainted land. Such a thought flashed through his mind, but he didn't show it on his face. That's right. The untainted land of the untainted land is completely different from other worlds. If we work hard, we should be able to successfully destroy the invasion of these two worlds. We can definitely do it. Azura's hope was rekindled by Luo Fan's words. Luo Fan smiled and said, that's right. Fellow Taoist is now considered a living being of the untainted land. I wonder if you are willing to contribute a part of your strength to this untainted land calamity? The invasion of those two worlds has always been merciless. Now it's already so amazing. If I obtain the power of the untainted land, I'm afraid that the terror will increase by tens of thousands of times. At that time, billions of worlds in the heavens may be destroyed because of this. I'm afraid that my hometown will not be able to survive. This matter is naturally duty-bound. It's just that, my current strength is so low. Chaotic thunder essence? Azura's body emitted a raging fighting spirit, but as he spoke, he didn't seem to have much confidence. Luo Fan smiled and said, as long as you have this intention, it's enough. In terms of strength, there is still a lot of time to cultivate and improve. It's only 30,000 years. Even if the untainted land of the untainted land is mysterious, it can at most replace the power in my body with the 9 heavens thunder yuan. I'm afraid that I won't even be able to obtain the strength that I should have, let alone improve my nature. If I want to truly resist the invasion of the two worlds, I really don't have the strength to do so. Chaotic thunder essence? Azura looked as if he had died. Luo Fan smiled and said, fellow Taoist, you don't have to worry about time. I have a wonderful method that can speed up time. 30,000 years, I can speed it up to more than 3 million years. If you are willing to help, I can set up a space-time formation for you to cultivate. Speed up time? As expected of the untainted land, even such a heaven-defying method exists. Chaotic thunder essence? Azura shouted with joy. See chaotic thunder essence? Azura's 7 emotions made Luo Fan more and more worried. If he had such a temperament, how could he chaotic thunder essence? Azura could not control the chaotic thunder yuan at all. Even controlling the 9 heavens thunder yuan would be a little difficult. If his power was too strong and his temperament was not good enough, he could go berserk at any time. At that time, whether it was the carefree heavenly devil or the supreme mental demon, it was very likely that they would come to him. In that case, he wanted to chaotic thunder essence? Azura helping to deal with the two worlds would be like hitting a dog with a meat bun. Instead, he might be lost in it and strengthen the power of the carefree heavenly devil or the supreme mental demon. With a thought, Luo Fan said, however, before that, fellow Taoist, you need to change your cultivation technique. To be honest, although the cultivation technique that you are cultivating is exquisite, it is not compatible with the untainted land. If you continue to cultivate this cultivation technique, you will be very easy to go berserk. At that time, Luo Fan didn't say anything else. However, the meaning was already very clear, and there was no need to say more. This chaotic thunder essence? Azura could not help but hesitate. He had already expected that there was a huge difference between his cultivation technique and the cultivation technique in the untainted land of the immortal world. It could even be said to be rough and crude. However, he did not expect that there would be such serious consequences. Mr. Luo Fan, please accept me as your disciple. Chaotic thunder essence? Azura brought up the old matter again. He bowed and refused to get up for a long time. Although Luo Fan had already accepted a few disciples, his standards for accepting disciples did not lower. Chaotic thunder essence? He did not like Azura at all, so he was naturally unwilling to accept him. Therefore, he only raised his hand to help chaotic thunder essence? Azura said, "Fellow Taoist, you are flattering me. We can just call each other friends. As for the cultivation technique, fellow Taoist, you don't have to worry about it. To me, it is just a small matter. If fellow Taoist doesn't mind, you can cultivate the cultivation technique that I have modified for you." Chaotic thunder essence? Azura brought up the old matter again because he wanted to take this opportunity to see if there was a chance for him to become Luo Fan's disciple. However, he did not expect the result to be the same. He could not help but feel discouraged and could only settle for the next best thing. He said, "Mr. Luo Fan, please teach me. I will be very grateful." As he spoke, he opened his right hand, and a large handful of lightning appeared in his hand. This lightning was crystal clear, like beautiful jade. It was also incomparably pure, with almost no impurities. However, the essence of this lightning glow was merely an ordinary lightning that was formed from the natural change in the weather. Although it had been compressed by an unknown number of times, the essence of its strength could not be compared to any of the heavenly lightning or divine lightning within the gale lightning fire layer. After this handful of lightning appeared, it continuously compressed and condensed. In the blink of an eye, it was compressed into a small piece of lightning jade the size of a thumb. My cultivation technique is recorded in this lightning jade. However, it is too crude. Mr. Luo Fan, please do not laugh. Azura's expression was a bit embarrassed as he handed this lightning jade to Luo Fan. Luo Fan faintly smiled. He raised his hand and the lightning jade flew into his hand. With a thought, he put the cultivation technique that was recorded in this lightning jade into his mind. After a slight analysis, he clearly understood all the mysteries of this cultivation technique. This cultivation method was not as simple and crude as he had expected. Instead, it was rather exquisite. However, because it was biased, it became chaotic thunder essence. Azura was able to cultivate his current, somewhat deformed cultivation base. Chapter 279. Legendary Man, True Lord of Stars. Luo Fan's thoughts turned slightly, and he already knew how to modify such a cultivation method. With a slight thought, countless complicated characters and mysterious patterns flashed in his mind. Then, he raised his hand and gently waved it. The thunder jade in his hand instantly collapsed and turned into a large amount of lightning. After this lightning appeared, it began to rapidly compress, stretching and twisting. In the blink of an eye, it formed a large, lifelike, three-dimensional diagram that looked like it was drawn by sky-blue threads. It was vivid and lifelike. It was written in the Panga language. These characters were complex and profound, and were the most original and direct way to express one's thoughts. Even living beings who didn't understand these words could sense the intent contained in these words and understand the general meaning of these words from the shape of these words. If one learned these words, the information one could obtain from these words would be unimaginable. The primordial world would automatically add profoundness to these words, making it easier for one to understand the cultivation techniques, mystical abilities, spells, and mysteries recorded in the words. Thunder? As soon as Azura saw these Pangu characters, he completely immersed himself in them. As a being that had lived for hundreds of thousands of years, and had even relied on a cultivation method to raise his cultivation to his current level, his wisdom was not simple. In fact, he could even be said to be brimming with talent, a genius gifted by the heavens. Therefore, he only slightly observed the words in front of him. Thunder? Azura felt as if his horizons had been broadened. He felt as if the layers of clouds that had been covering him had been lifted in an instant. It was like a person who had never seen a movie before suddenly seeing a 3D movie. He simply could not imagine that there would actually be such a mysterious character in this world that could directly point to one's thoughts. With his supermind, with just a glance, he had already learned the Pangu characters through the corresponding relationship between the characters and his will. However, very soon, he shifted his attention away from the Pangu characters, because he noticed that the things recorded on these Pangu characters were even more precious. It was even more mysterious and inconceivable. The cultivation method recorded on this large piece of Pangu characters was of the same origin as the cultivation method he had been cultivating with, but it was tens of thousands of times more profound and mysterious than the cultivation method he had been cultivating with. Its profoundness was so profound that even if he had already comprehended the cultivation method he cultivated to the point where it was almost at the origin level, he still couldn't clearly see what kind of profoundness was contained within. Compared to the cultivation method that Luo Fan had modified, the cultivation method that he had cultivated in the past could simply be called trash. It would not be a pity to directly throw it into the trash can. It turns out that my cultivation method can be improved to this level. This place is indeed worthy of being called the celestial world. No wonder Mr. Luo Fan is an expert from the primordial immortal world. Thunder? Azura was so excited that he was almost trembling. An excited expression appeared on his face, and his heart was filled with an indescribable joy. At this moment, he was extremely grateful for his good luck. It was as if he was greedily absorbing this cultivation method into his memory. His memory was naturally quite amazing. Although this cultivation method was profound and mysterious, making it difficult for him to understand its mysteries, it only had tens of thousands of words. But it only took him a few breaths to completely memorize it in his mind, and completely incorporate it into his memory. At this point, Thunder? Azura breathed a sigh of relief. He bowed to Luo Fan and said, "Thank you, Mr. Luo Fan, for giving me this cultivation method. With this cultivation method, I will definitely be able to reach the Starry Sky Grade 9 in the future. This is all bestowed by Mr. Luo Fan. Please accept this bow from me." Luo Fan smiled slightly, and the text condensed from thunder and lightning collapsed in an instant, completely turning into specks of blue light that dissipated in all directions. Then, he raised his hand gently and an invisible force was generated out of thin air, directly containing the thunder and lightning. Azura helped him up and said, "Helping you is helping me, why so polite? Thunder?" Azura did not continue to insist on kowtowing, but still expressed his gratitude. Luo Fan declined for a moment, then changed the topic and said, "Fellow Taoist, if you want to practice this cultivation method, you need to first use a period of time to convert the energy in your body into 9 heavens thunder yuan. Now is the right time. I will set up a space-time array for fellow Taoists to practice." Hearing Luo Fan's words, "Thunder?" Azura naturally felt even more grateful. Luo Fan didn't hesitate. He raised his hand and beckoned. Countless astral baleful chi and star essence chi rapidly gathered in the void. In the blink of an eye, they had already gathered around his body, unceasingly accumulating. When the astral baleful chi and star essence chi reached a boundary and seemed about to condense into a substance, Luo Fan raised his hand and gently moved it in the void. In a blink of an eye, a mysterious and inexplicable trajectory flashed through the position of his right hand. Then, the combination of the star essence chi and astral baleful chi quickly elongated, quickly condensed, and quickly twisted the outline. In a short while, it had turned into a circular array that was 10 feet in size. After the array appeared, Luo Fan raised his hand and slapped it. The array that was 10 feet in radius suddenly shook and suddenly expanded rapidly. In the blink of an eye, the array had completely enveloped the entire nine heavens thunder essence in the depths of the cave. In the array, space-time changed rapidly. The space within a radius of 10,000 feet gradually expanded, and the time that was equivalent to the time of the primordial world accelerated rapidly. In the blink of an eye, the space with a radius of 10,000 feet turned into a space with a radius of 10,000 feet. The time also accelerated to 100 times that of the primordial world. This was the space-time grand array that Luo Fan had set up casually. Moreover, the time acceleration ability of this grand array had reached the limit that he could set up at will. He raised his hand and gently grabbed at the void. A bit of blue light appeared from the void. The blue light was pure and condensed, as if it was solid. He raised his hand and gently tapped it. The light suddenly rushed towards Thunder? Azura rushed over. In the blink of an eye, he had arrived at Thunder? In Azura's hand. Luo Fan smiled and said, "As long as you send your mind into this array, you will be able to control this space-time grand array at will. You can even move this array to another location. However, because the materials used to refine this array are too simple, this array can only be transferred 3 times. It's a little imperfect. This array can be transferred 3 times. Thunder?" Azura was shocked by the space-time transformation around Luo Fan after he set up the array. Suddenly, when he heard that the array could be transferred 3 times, he could not help but feel as if he had been hit on the head by a pie. "Don't blame me for being rough, fellow Taoist," said Luo Fan with a smile. "Thunder?" Azura was naturally grateful. How could he dare to have any objections? After chatting for a while, Luo Fan made an appointment with him to go to Buzhou Mountain to look for him if he succeeded in his cultivation in the future. After that, he raised his hand and tore open a space-time door between the real and the fake. Then, his body shook and turned into all kinds of connate primordial chi, gale chi, and other kinds of energy that formed this will incarnation. Amidst these energies, there was a peculiar spiritual light flashing. Then, the spiritual light suddenly rushed into the space-time door. As the spiritual light rushed in, the space-time door suddenly closed and disappeared without a trace in an instant. In this grand array, only Thunder, which had just stepped into the untainted world for a long time, was left. Azura was all alone. "One day, I will also have this kind of power. There will come a day." "Thunder?" Azura looked at the disappearing space-time door and sensed the will incarnation energy. He murmured, an endless fighting spirit appeared in his eyes. Lifting his foot, he took a few steps and arrived above the 9 heavens thunder essence, which was 100 feet in diameter. He then sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes to cultivate the cultivation method that Luo Fan had modified. It was now completely different from his original cultivation method. Instantly, the entire grand array flashed with lightning. Countless electric arcs emitted from the thunder essence and gathered into a ball. Azura's body was completely submerged. After Luo Fan's will passed through the space-time door between the real and the fake, it directly returned to his main body on Buzhou Mountain. In an instant, his main body, which was in the star meditation cushion, slowly opened its eyes. However, there was not much joy in his eyes. Instead, there was a hint of worry. Although there was more thunder essence, Azura was a new force with a good future and a deep understanding of the billions of worlds in the universe. However, the news he received from him made Luo Fan even more worried. It seems that the existence that ascended to the untainted world from the netherworld is very likely to be occupied by the supreme heart demon. Luo Fan thought to himself, the reason why he had such a bold guess was because he saw thunder essence? Azura's thoughts after cultivating the cultivation method. If that was possible, the living creature that entered the untainted world from the netherworld first, no matter how strong it would probably be arrogant but weak. Its realm was quite high, but it had no cultivation. The nature of its power was also extremely weak. That living creature entered the untainted world in such a state without Luo Fan's guidance. It must have absorbed all kinds of primordial qi in the untainted world at an extremely fast speed to replace the energy in its body. This method, because one's temperament could not control too strong of a power, would make it extremely easy for this person to go berserk, and the Supreme Heart Demon of the Supreme Heart Transference Heaven would seize the opportunity. With this thought in mind, Luo Fan's mind and will flowed through the mysterious and unfathomable mantra. At the same time, his right hand quickly moved. Specks of inexplicable light flashed in his mind out of thin air. After a while, the spiritual light condensed into a light shadow in his mind and will. Through these light shadows, Luo Fan already understood that his guess was correct. In the netherworld, there was indeed a living creature that had broken through to the starry sky level 9. Moreover, this living creature had broken through the space barrier of the netherworld by chance, passed through the barrier of time and space, and ascended into the untainted world. He even deduced that after this living creature entered the untainted world, it was somewhere in the middle of the untainted world, and it was trillions of miles away from Buzhou Mountain. However, other than that, he could not deduce anything else. At the same time, he also deduced that the Supreme Heart Demon of the Supreme Heart Transference Heaven had also entered the untainted world at the same time as this living creature. Both of them disappeared from Luo Fan's calculations at the same time. If one were to say that there was no relationship between the two, it would not make sense. So that's how it is. Luo Fan secretly sighed. He dispersed the mantra that flowed through his mind. Since this matter had been confirmed, there was no need to think too much about it. He just needed to be more vigilant. Thinking of this, with a turn of his mind, the chaotic Yuan Qi pond under the starry praying mat transformed into pure chaotic Yuan Qi, which was constantly injected into Luo Fan's body, transforming into pure and condensed energy, which continuously flowed into his body. It was refined, purified, and scattered. Finally, through some mysterious and indescribable transformation, it rushed into the world of his sea of consciousness, pouring into some mysterious place in the dark, replenishing his exhausted mind and consciousness. Although he did not directly open the space-time gate and his real body crossed a long distance to more than 300 billion miles, this did not mean that his mind would not be damaged. After all, sending his mind more than 300 billion miles away, even if the mental connection was through some inexplicable mechanism, it was impossible to not be damaged at all. Coupled with the subsequent calculations, this was another round of consumption. Therefore, at this moment, Luo Fan could already feel that his mind had been damaged to a point where he had no choice but to replenish it. The star praying mat was very mysterious. No matter how much chaotic Yuan Qi Luo Fan absorbed, it could automatically gather the chaotic Yuan Qi from the outside world within 100 feet of itself and replenish the chaotic Yuan Qi pond below it. Therefore, though Luo Fan absorbed an enormous amount of chaotic Yuan Qi, the water level of the chaotic Yuan Qi pond below the star praying mat did not decrease at all. After a while, Luo Fan felt his state of mind return to normal. His mental state became complete again. With a thought, his mental state and the star praying mat spread out in all directions. In a trance, he felt as if his mind had become one with the endless starry sky. Countless stars lit up one by one in his mind. The countless stars were beautiful and mysterious. Carefully savoring this strange feeling, he felt as if he had understood something. But after careful inspection, he didn't seem to have understood anything. Snapping back to reality, Luo Fan knew that his cultivation level had increased by a tiny amount. He was very happy. Taking a step forward, he was already out of the star praying mat's range of effect. Waving his hand, the star-praying mat's strange phenomenon completely disappeared. The star-praying mat once again became simple and ordinary. It slowly floated before Luo Fan and landed in Luo Fan's hand. In the future, maybe I can give this praying mat to my disciples. It will be more beneficial for them. Luo Fan sighed. When this star-praying mat fell into his hands, it could be said that he had cast a bright pearl before swine, but he had lost the opportunity to turn it into a magical treasure. Luo Fan obviously would not waste too much time to refine this star-praying mat, and it was even more impossible for him to integrate the mysterious things he had obtained that could upgrade magical tools into magical treasures. With this thought in mind, Luo Fan had already determined who the star-praying mat's owner was. However, he naturally wouldn't give this magic weapon to someone so easily. Instead, he planned to set up a test to observe that person and make him work hard to get the star-praying mat. Otherwise, this star-praying mat wouldn't be able to get the status that Luo Fan hoped for it to get. Lifting his hand and pointing, the star-praying mat was covered with a layer of mysterious three-dimensional talisman. Then, the star-praying mat turned into a sky-blue rainbow. With a dash, a turn, and a fall, it dashed towards a place at the foot of Buzhou Mountain. In a short while, it had already rushed across a distance of nearly 100,000 miles and arrived in front of the valley at the foot of Buzhou Mountain, where the space-time illusory land was located. At this moment, the clone magic weapon sitting in front of the valley seemed to have sensed something. It suddenly raised its head and raised its hand. The star-praying mat landed gently and landed in its hand. As soon as it came into contact with the star-praying mat, the clone magic weapon's eyes flashed with enlightenment. It had already understood what the main body meant. It stood up and took a light step forward, entering the space-time illusory land. In the space-time illusory land, time flowed 10 times faster than in the primordial world. Although Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang had not been in the space-time illusory land for a long time, it was enough for them to build a cave abode here. This clone magic weapon was originally created to protect the space-time illusory land and receive the innate God. Naturally, it could easily understand the various changes in the space-time illusory land. In the blink of an eye, it had already understood the location of Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang at this moment. With a slight thought, it threw the star-praying mat that was covered with a layer of strange three-dimensional talisman. Like a stream of light that only Luo Fu could see, it landed somewhere in the space-time illusory land. When it landed on the ground, the three-dimensional talisman that covered the surface of the star-praying mat suddenly exploded. It instantly dispersed, and with the help of the illusory land's ability to turn the false into the real, it directly created a medium-sized mountain range at that location. The structure of the mountain range was strange, like 108 strange stars in the endless starry sky that decorated the ground. A misty, mysterious light rose from the ground and traversed the heavens and the earth. This mysterious light was very strange. No matter who it was, even if it was an innate God who had already attained the Tao, they would not be able to see this mysterious light. Only Luo Fu, who had been set up by Luo Fan, could discover this kind of spiritual light. After doing all this, Luo Fan moved his mind. This clone magic weapon stepped out of the space-time illusory land and continued to sit at the entrance of the valley, under the 4 big words space-time illusory land. That mountain range was specially built by Luo Fan for Luo Fu. It contained the simple formation of the star formation that came with the star-praying mat. Although its power was far less than the star formation, it was still quite amazing. This formation integrated attack and defense, and it also had an indescribable sealing ability. If one wanted to break through the shroud of this formation and enter the depths of the mountain range to find the star-praying mat, one needed to have an understanding of the endless starry sky that was beyond ordinary people, and at least reach the realm of primordial returning. Today, Luo Fu had reached the realm, but his understanding of the endless starry sky was far behind. Chapter 280. Another World, a Strange Fruit. After sending the incomparably mysterious star meditation cushion to the bottom of Buzhou Mountain, Luo Fan moved and took a step forward. His figure had already disappeared from the primordial world. When he reappeared, he went to the medium-class world inside the Void Wuji Palace, which was also the majestic and spacious hall. After a long period of sacrificial refinement since its creation, the size of the hall had more than doubled. From the looks of it, it was already about 200,000 feet in radius. Even though the medium-class world was filled with so many huge pillars, it still seemed quite spacious. In the center of the hall, the limitless boy, who was engraved on it like a relief sculpture, had more than half of his body protruding out of the stone wall. He looked like a living creature that grew at the top of the hall. Luo Fan came to the center of the hall and looked up. He saw the limitless boy bowing to him expressionlessly. Luo Fan smiled slightly and waved his hand gently. The limitless boy felt his thoughts. He shrank his body, turned back into a relief sculpture, and entered the top of the hall. Seeing the limitless boy return, Luo Fan moved his mind. All kinds of primordial energy produced by the medium-class world quickly gathered towards him. In a short while, it condensed into a gray cloud under the medium-sized hall. These gray clouds were surging rapidly, and an extremely mysterious change occurred, producing countless chaotic primordial energy. This kind of chaotic primordial energy was incomparably pure. Although it was not as large as the chaotic primordial energy see at the top of Buzhou Mountain, it contained a trace of the mystery of the medium-class world's creation process. It was more lively and beneficial to cultivation. At this time, the medium-class world could only accelerate the flow of time to twice the speed of the primordial world. Although this speed seemed to be extremely different from the acceleration ability of the minor chiliocosm, and could not even be compared to the space-time formation he had set up in the primordial world. However, with the help of the medium-class world, it had a characteristic that the space-time array in the primordial world did not have and could not have. That was, it could be superimposed. The space-time formation could change the flow of time, but that could only happen in the primordial world. If this were to happen in a minor or dimensional realm, then the space-time grand formation would fail. Unless the flow of time in the minor chiliocosm and the medium chiliocosm was slowed down to the primordial world, this kind of space-time formation would only work again. Luo Fan's heart moved slightly, and the limitless boy's endless memories flowed through his mind. After a while, Luo Fan finally understood how the limitless boy had refined the dimensional realm and the minor dimension over the years. After understanding the refinement process, Luo Fan raised his hand and made a grabbing motion in the air. With this grasping motion, the space-time of this dimensional realm would have exploded, creating countless tiny space fragments. But at this time, the void was only slightly distorted, and there was no tiny space crack, let alone space explosion. Seeing this, Luo Fan's expression did not change, but an incomparably joyful thought flashed through his mind. It can actually accommodate one more minor chiliocosm. A perfect dimensional realm could accommodate 3,000 minor chiliocosms. The number of minor chiliocosms that could be accommodated represented the degree of perfection of this dimensional realm. With a thought, Luo Fan directly stretched out his right hand and suddenly made a grasping motion. With a thunderclap, a loud noise that seemed to split the sky and earth broke out in his palm. With this loud noise, endless chaotic energy poured into his palm from all directions. In the blink of an eye, it formed a gray vortex that was getting bigger and bigger. The suction became stronger and stronger, and the vortex became bigger and bigger. After a while, all the gray fog in the entire hall disappeared without a trace. It was completely absorbed by the vortex in his palm and poured into a very mysterious place. After the gray fog was absorbed, a strange sound came from his palm. This sound was like a heartbeat, like a cow's roar, like the invisible sound of the birth of a life, like some inconceivable existence was telling him the truth of the great Tao. These sounds were fleeting, almost inaudible, but they directly poured into one's heart, as if they were emerging from the bottom of one's heart, constantly circling and penetrating deep into one's heart. After the endless chaotic energy rushed into the vortex, it was as if it had rushed into a black hole, without the slightest sound leaking out. In his palm, all that was left was a lump of black substance that was churning. Then, the strange sound reached its peak. In the blink of an eye, it turned into an incomparably strange crackling sound. With this crackling sound, the vortex instantly disappeared. There was endless energy constantly surging in the original location of the vortex, which was the palm of his hand. It looked as if a world had been opened in the palm of his hand. He opened his palm. In an instant, clear chi rose from his palm, and the turbid chi sank. The earth, water, fire, and wind surged crazily, and a wider and wider world was constantly opening in his palm. This world was a small kiliacosm. The size of this small kiliacosm rapidly increased, but its appearance was still the same as before. It was just that it was confined in his palm, looking like a small black ball. The entire small kiliacosm was a void, without any material existence in it. The void continued to expand, and the turbid chi and the clear chi were constantly produced and constantly separated. When the entire space and the entire world had expanded to a radius of millions of miles, the expansion speed of the small kiliacosm had greatly decreased. Then, it began to slowly shrink. When Luo Fan sensed this change, a trace of pity flashed through his mind. But it was only a trace. He already knew that the reason why this small kiliacosm could only reach its current size and could not continue to grow was because the supplementary energy of the medium-sized world was insufficient. At this time, if he wanted to continue and ensure that this small kiliacosm could be completely opened, he would need a large amount of energy to pour into it. He needed a massive amount of energy to pour into it. Perhaps this energy was produced by the dimensional realm, or perhaps it was filled with his own magic power. Only in this way could the small kiliacosm truly expand to such a vast and endless size, and then it could truly produce its own vitality and form its own cycle. However, the amount of energy needed was too large, too huge. If Luo Fan really wanted to create this small kiliacosm completely, he might not be able to fill it with all of his magic power. If he could create a small kiliacosm at will in the untainted land, it would not be so embarrassing. Because when a world was created, it would automatically absorb energy to replenish the loss of the world. In the untainted land, because the various kinds of vitality and energy in the untainted land were almost endless, when a world was created, there would be infinite energy for it to absorb. As long as this small kiliacosm had a beginning, it would be like an avalanche that had a beginning. Then, when the conditions were right, success would follow, and it would definitely be completely formed. What a pity! Luo Fan sighed. He raised his hand and pinched. The small kiliacosm in his palm instantly deformed, and then suddenly exploded, turning into endless space fragments, scattering in all directions from his palm. In the blink of an eye, his body was surrounded by a starry sky. Then, the space of the medium-sized world fluctuated, and all the space fragments disappeared completely. The trace of the existence of the small kiliacosm had been completely removed. Although Luo Fan had the qualification to seek the Tai Dao fruit, his cultivation realm and strength were still far from being able to casually create a small kiliacosm in the untainted land. To be able to create a space in the palm of his hand and create a small kiliacosm in the medium-sized world with a casual pinch, he had to rely on the condition that this medium-sized world was created by himself. It was a pity that because of the lack of energy, the creation of this small kiliacosm failed. The small kiliacosm that Luo Fan had casually created had been destroyed, but the gray fog that filled the small kiliacosm, which was different from the general chaotic energy, had been completely consumed. Even if the small kiliacosm had been destroyed, it could not be released again. The entire hall became empty again. Although there was a large amount of yuan qi being produced rapidly, it was like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. It could not replenish the chaotic qi of this medium-sized world in a short period of time. Standing quietly in front of the door in the middle of the hall, Luo Fan sighed. He knew that if he wanted to wait for more worlds to appear in this dimensional realm, then he would need a long time to do so. With a thought, he stepped forward and entered the door in front of him. As if he had passed through time and space, he entered the small Kiliacosm. The place where he appeared was directly above the thunderbolt pool in the top hall. Suddenly, his mind moved. He seemed to feel a strange thought coming from the depths of the thunderbolt pool. He raised his hand, and the fruit of Guangpu, which had been in the depths of the thunderbolt pool for tens of millions of years, suddenly rushed out of the thunderbolt pool. In an instant it arrived in front of Luo Fan. This fruit was very mysterious. There were countless complex and mysterious three-dimensional talismans inside it, forming layers upon layers of restrictions. It seemed to contain the infinite great Tao of good fortune. At that time, Luo Fan had combined the countless three-dimensional talismans and the veins of the Guangpu's leaves to comprehend a cultivation technique, the Hercules summoning art, which still had countless uses even at this time. He had also used its structure to open up a mysterious refining technique, such as the restriction refining technique. This fruit was a fruit, so it naturally contained a little vitality. If Luo Fan used the chaotic qi to cultivate this fruit, it was very likely that this vitality would grow into a spiritual consciousness. However, the spiritual consciousness that was formed would see him as a father and Guangpu as a mother. For Luo Fan, who had no intention of becoming a father, this was something he didn't want. Therefore, he directly sealed this fruit in the depths of the thunderbolt pool to endure the sacrificial refinement of the thunderbolt pool. This letter arrived at the present, who knew how many tens of millions of years later. At this moment, this fruit was a flat ball with a diameter of about 3 feet and a weight of at least 5,000 kilograms. Compared to tens of millions of years ago, the surface of the fruit already had traces of yellow lightning. These earthen yellow lightning bolts were the earth lightning of the lightning pool. This mini Kiliacosm was completely under Luo Fan's control. At this moment, he completely grasped the changes inside the fruit. The interior of the fruit had actually produced a strange spiritual consciousness, a strange thing that was born from the intersection of earth and wood. So narrow, so heavy, the thought that came from the unseen world seemed to be telling such a thought to Luo Fan. The voice of this thought was childish like a baby. Luo Fan's eyes shone with gold and silver light, and he had already seen through the origin of this fruit. He instantly understood that the 36 layers of restriction that were made up of unknown number of three-dimensional talismans had been refined by the thunderbolt pool for tens of millions of years. At this moment there was a mysterious change within the restriction. This change was similar to the changes that occurred to the restrictions within a magic treasure when it transformed into a magic treasure. With this change, the strength of the fruit had already become many times stronger than before. This also caused the spiritual opportunity inside the fruit to grow into a real spiritual consciousness, but it couldn't break the body of this fruit. This was similar to a creature inside an egg that couldn't break the eggshell. Under such circumstances, this fruit couldn't really be born into the world. I actually accidentally refined it into a magical weapon. Luo Fan couldn't help but sigh. At this moment, he couldn't help but admire the endless mysteries of heaven and earth. However, he only needed to think about it to know that it was reasonable for things to develop in this way. After all, the structure of this fruit was made up of 36 layers of restriction. Moreover, it was made up of countless three-dimensional talismans. With such a structure, it was not much different from a magical instrument. And a magical instrument had been refined by the thunderbolt pool that suppressed the entire mini-Kiliacosm for tens of millions of years. It became a magical weapon, So it was very natural for Luo Fan, it was very easy to release this spiritual consciousness from the fruit. However, if that was the case, this spiritual consciousness was very likely to recognize Luo Fan as its father, and its mother was born to be Guang Pu. If Luo Fan released it, it would cause a considerable amount of embarrassment. With this concern, Luo Fan's heart moved, and he raised his hand and pointed. This flat spherical fruit with a diameter of 30 feet suddenly rushed out and directly disappeared from the mini kiliacosm. When it reappeared, it was already above the chaotic Qi sea at the top of Buzhou Mountain. With a sudden shock, it directly turned into a mysterious light and rushed straight up into the endless starry sky above, rushing straight towards the bright moon in the depths of the starry sky. In just a short while, it passed through the endless starry sky and arrived above the moon. With a turn and a dash, it rushed straight into the three-dimensional talisman in the center of the moon through a crypt. In an instant, it fell in front of Guang Pu, who was cultivating. With the help of bright moon-child Shiha, Guang Pu had already successfully passed the 8th and 9th heavens tribulations nearly 200 years ago. All the power in her body had completed the most important transformation in her life, into spiritual power. This meant that she had already achieved the earthly immortal Tao fruit with infinite power. At this moment, inside Guang Pu's body, there was a stream of magic power formed by 12,960 moon-shaped talismans that were rapidly circulating around the circulation route of the lunar divine wood technique. During this process, it continuously absorbed the endless moon essence in the surroundings and poured it into the talismans. Then, it was broken into pieces and turned into an incomparably pure energy that replenished the incomparably empty magic power unit. Although it had been replenished for nearly 200 years, the spiritual power in her body was still exceptionally empty. It was still far from being truly perfect. Above her head, bright moon-child Shiha was sitting cross-legged on a silver auspicious cloud the size of an acre. His body exuded a mysterious and wonderful aura, which made the endless lunar essence around him flow toward him. Then, through some mysterious connection, it was injected into Guang Pu's body from between Guang Pu's eyebrows, and added to the spiritual power circulation in her body. It made the circulation of these lines into the spiritual power unit more convenient and easier. At this moment, something fell from the sky. It directly passed through the thick layer of the moon, passed through Shiha's layers of defense, passed through the three-dimensional talisman in the center of the moon, and directly landed in front of Guang Pu. Guang Pu was originally wholeheartedly focusing on the transformation of her spiritual power. Suddenly, she sensed the arrival of something and was shocked. Just as she was about to move, she found that this existence exuded an extremely familiar aura. This aura gave her a strange feeling, as if a piece of flesh had fallen from her body. Sensing the appearance of this aura, Guang Pu's mind trembled. How could she continue to maintain that state of cultivation? She immediately opened her eyes to take a look. She saw a flat ball-shaped object that was 30 feet in size, emitting earthy yellow lightning, descending from the sky. So narrow, so heavy. This thought was directly transmitted to Guang Pu's mind through some kind of connection. Hearing this voice, Guang Pu's mind could hardly remain calm. An indescribable sadness and heartache suddenly arose, and tears instantly flowed down her face. "This is my son." Guang Pu's heart was filled with surprise and heartache. The surprise was naturally that after such a long time, she could actually still find this descendant that she had long given up on. She had already given up on him. The heartache was that this descendant was now expressing all kinds of pain to her. Sitting cross-legged on the auspicious cloud above Guang Pu's head, Shiha's crystal-like eyes shot out 2 rays of silver light, which instantly enveloped the fruit that had suddenly descended from the sky. The 2 rays of silver light were pure and crystal clear, appearing to be exceptionally mysterious. Under the light, time and space were slightly distorted. The fruit's past was like the reflection of a 3-dimensional movie, constantly flowing into Shiha's eyes and directly into Guang Pu's mind through the mysterious connection. These two rays of silver light were actually very similar to the bright moon silver eyes that Luo Fan had comprehended from the three-dimensional talisman in the center of the moon. In fact, these two rays of silver light were one of Shiha's special abilities. It was also a mysterious ability that was produced by the incomparably close connection between it and the moon. Its power was extremely powerful, and it could trace back time. Looking at an object, it could see the infinite past of that object through the special power of its eyes, and it could even see through the initial state of its birth. When the fruit's past flowed into her mind, Guang Pu could not help but instantly burst into tears. Chapter 281. Guang Pu's plea, Luo Fan's disappointment. The moonlight passed through the 36 restrictions that Guang Pu was incomparably familiar with, yet also somewhat unfamiliar with, and directly poured into the spiritual consciousness at the core of the fruit. In an instant, it completely enveloped the spiritual consciousness. The moonlight was gathered by Guang Pu's mind, and naturally carried a bit of Guang Pu's aura. This aura, to the spiritual consciousness, was the aura of its mother. But to it was incomparably familiar, incomparably intimate, incomparably nostalgic. In an instant, it made the spiritual consciousness recover from its unbearable anxiety and calm. Mother! A dreamlike thought came out from the spiritual consciousness, and directly passed through an indescribable connection into Guang Pu's mind. When Guang Pu received such a thought, her tears could no longer be stopped, and like two pools of spring water, they directly flowed down. My pitiful son, holding your mother's hand for such a long time. Where was Guang Pu's previous noble, sacred and elegant look? Right now she clearly looked like an ordinary mother who was worried for her children, and felt guilty because she had been away from her children for too long. This fruit, to Luo Fan, could be easily broken open and release that spiritual consciousness, but to the current Guang Pu, that was an almost impossible task. With Guang Pu's current cultivation realm and strength, to break open the fruit's defense and refine it as a magic weapon was naturally simple, and it was even possible to obtain a rare magic weapon. But if she wanted to release the spiritual consciousness inside the fruit without any damage, that was equivalent to helping the treasure spirit of a magic weapon to transcend the restrictions of the magic weapon, and it was an almost impossible task. The endless moonlight poured into the fruit, and through some mysterious and inconceivable method, transformed into an indescribable mysterious burst of power, and suddenly exploded in all directions, wanting to break through the 36 restrictions of the fruit and open the fruit itself, allowing the spiritual consciousness inside to rush out. As the explosion occurred, the fruit suddenly exploded. In the blink of an eye, it had expanded by more than 100 times, from its original diameter of 30 feet to more than 3,000 feet. However, when the explosive force gradually subsided, the huge fruit that was more than 300 meters long suddenly shrank again, and the speed at which it shrank was beyond imagination. In the blink of an eye, it had shrunk to its original size of 30 feet. During this process, countless strange energies rushed out from the various orifices of the fruit. The source of this energy was the lunar essence of extreme Yin. However, it brought with it an indescribable vitality. It turned from the original silver to the current cyan, turning into a cyan mist that gradually gathered around the fruit. Following the appearance of these green clouds, the lunar essence that was rushing into the fruit was gradually met with an increasingly strong resistance. It was as if it was preventing all energy from entering, making it more and more difficult for the lunar essence to enter. Guang Pu took a closer look and couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised. Naturally, she was surprised because the appearance of this resistance made it difficult for her to truly break through the outer layer of the fruit's defense and release her son. But she was delighted because the 36 restrictions of the outer layer of defense actually had such a great ability. It could so quickly refine the lunar essence of extreme Yin into a power that could be controlled by itself. In this way, after her son broke out of the outer layer of defense, It only needed to slightly refine the 36 restrictions on the outer layer of the fruit, and it would become a rare magic item. It might even become a powerful magic treasure. Guangpu tried his best for a long time, but the fruit only continued to expand. Then, it quickly shrank. The biggest expansion was 1,000 times, reaching a diameter of 3,000 feet. However, even though it had expanded to such an extent, it was still unable to break through the 36 layers of restrictions. Instead, the cyan mist around the fruit gradually accumulated into a cyan auspicious cloud the size of an acre. That spiritual sense, however, still seemed to be fixed in time and space, firmly locked in the core of the fruit. It couldn't even sway a little, so how could it escape? "Child, don't worry, Mother will definitely find a way to let you out." Guangpu carefully sent this thought into the core of the fruit, where the spiritual sense was located. As this thought was sent in, the spiritual sense sent out a kind of joy, peace, and trust into Guangpu's mind. It was like a baby gradually falling into a deep sleep in its mother's embrace. When Guangpu received these thoughts of joy, peace, and trust, she made up her mind to completely let this spiritual sense out. "This is quite troublesome. Although I have many tricks up my sleeve, it's difficult to let my son out without harming him. I'll have to ask Master for help." This thought flashed across Guangpu's mind. Through Shiha's eyes, which she had seen through the fruit's past, Guangpu already knew that the fruit had been sent by Luo Fan. Her heart was filled with endless gratitude for Luo Fan, but she also felt a little ashamed. Although Guangpu didn't fully understand Luo Fan's considerations, she could roughly guess. Naturally, she knew that Luo Fan didn't release his son directly because of his status. Instead, he spent a great deal of effort to send his son from the untainted world to the depths of the endless starry sky. She was naturally grateful for this. However, what she felt ashamed about was that her master had sent the fruit from hundreds of millions of miles away, but she couldn't use her own strength to release her son as her master had hoped. This was clearly because she couldn't meet her master's requirements. Her progress was too slow. How could she not feel ashamed? If it had been anything else, Guangpu would have put it aside and directly cultivated in peace. She wanted to reach the level that Luo Fan had requested as soon as possible and get things done. However, this was different. This was related to her precious son. Her precious son was currently sealed in the fruit, waiting for her help. How could she calm down and cultivate in peace? Every day that the fruit stayed by her side was one more day of suffering for her. Therefore, although Guangpu felt extremely ashamed, she still decided to bite the bullet and directly return to the untainted world to ask Luo Fan. It would be best if she could obtain his body and let her son out directly. After making up her mind, Guangpu instantly pointed at the top of her head. Bright Moon Child turned and instantly sucked in the auspicious cloud under him. His body turned into a strange small moon and suddenly sank into the top of Guangpu's head into her body. Following that, Guangpu suddenly stood up, raised her hand, and pointed. The fruit in front of her, which was wrapped in a green cloud, shrunk and entered her palm. It was like a tattoo engraved on her palm. This was a life-preserving technique that Guangpu cultivated. Although it was not as good as the heaven and earth in the sleeve, the heaven and earth in the palm, or the sun and moon in the chest, it was still quite profound. After doing all this, Guangpu turned her body and turned into a long silver rainbow. She rushed up and directly passed through the layer of the moon formed by the lunar essence without any resistance. Soon, she rushed out of the moon's surface. Soon after, she charged towards the untainted world that she had sensed. She constantly flickered and shifted in the void, constantly distorting space. Every time she shifted, she would traverse an incomparably long distance. After a few days, she had already traversed an unknown number of millions of miles, charging straight into the untainted world. Although Guangpu had attained the earthly immortal's Tao fruit, her realm and cultivation were many times worse than Luo Fan's. In this case, the place that she could sense was, of course, the place that she thought was the most conspicuous, Buzhou Mountain. After passing through a layer of invisible and intangible space barrier, the silver rainbow that Guang Pu turned into landed on the liquefied chaotic primordial qi at the top of Buzhou Mountain. It condensed and turned into a beautiful and elegant, goddess-like Guang Pu. Arriving here, Guang Pu's breathing became heavy. This was because she realized that the pressure of the heaven and earth here was so strong that she almost had to use her spiritual power to withstand the pressure. So Master has been enduring this pressure all this time. This thought emerged in Guang Pu's mind. But soon, she threw this thought to the back of her mind and knelt down gracefully. She bowed and said, "Unfilial disciple Guang Pu begs for an audience, Master." After 3 times in a row, she prostrated and remained motionless. Looking at her appearance, it seemed that if Luo Fan did not grant her an audience, she would always prostrate like this. At this moment, a strange door that was 30 feet tall appeared in front of Guang Pu. Then, Luo Fan's simple and unadorned figure stepped out of the door. When Guang Pu heard the movement, although she did not feel any aura, she knew that her master had arrived. She was overjoyed and said, "Disciple has disturbed Master's cultivation, I deserve to die. Why are you so polite? Get up." Luo Fan shook his head and said lightly. As he spoke, he raised his hand and waved an invisible force, directly lifting up Guang Pu, who was prostrating on the ground and seemed like she would never get up. Although Guang Pu wanted to continue kneeling on the ground to show her sincerity, how could she resist Luo Fan's will? However, he was lifted up without any delay. "I already know why you are here. I have a way to let your son out, but I need Fu Er's help. You can go to the foot of the mountain to find where the space-time illusion is. My doppelganger magic weapon will tell you how to deal with it," Luo Fan said to Guang Pu. "Thank you, Master." Guang Pu hurriedly bowed with inexplicable surprise. Luo Fan nodded slightly, raised his hand and stepped into the space door. In the blink of an eye, he had already disappeared in the untainted world. "I must have disappointed Master." Seeing that Luo Fan left without saying a word, Guang Pu could not help but secretly speculate. She felt quite uneasy. But in the end, her worry for her son prevailed. Chapter 282. A family meeting. Although Mount Buzhou was large, Guang Pu had already attained the earthly immortal Tao fruit, and Luo Fan didn't conceal the aura of the illusory spacetime. Instead, he used a special method to stimulate its aura and reveal its existence to the entire heavens and the earth. Thus, it was naturally an extremely simple matter for Guang Pu to find the illusory spacetime. In a short while, Guang Pu had already arrived in front of the valley where the spacetime illusion was located. The long rainbow descended and condensed, turning into the image of a beautiful and elegant goddess. Luo Fan's doppelganger magic tool had already obtained the consciousness of the original body and had been waiting for a long time. Seeing Guang Pu's figure descending, she nodded and said, "Fu Er and the other 2 are cultivating in the illusion. Remember this method first, I'll bring you to find them later." "Thank you, Master." Guang Pu did not dare to neglect. Although it was only a doppelganger magic tool in front of Guang Pu and not Luo Fan's original body, this magic tool carried a part of Luo Fan's consciousness after all. It was reasonable to say that it was Luo Fan himself. At least, to Guang Pu, the one in front of her was the real Luo Fan, so she naturally did not dare to neglect it. Luo Fan's doppelganger magic tool raised its hand and pointed gently. A spiritual light rushed out of his hand and coiled like a spiritual snake. In an instant, it crossed the space and rushed straight into the Niwen between Guang Pu's eyebrows. The spiritual snake-like spiritual light was not completely solid, but was formed by countless words and patterns. Among them, there were hundreds of thousands of words and thousands of patterns that were rotating and changing. These words and patterns were like billions of stars that directly rushed into Guang Pu's Niwen palace and directly rushed into her sea of consciousness. Then, they exploded in an instant and were transformed into a special nature. With a thought, Guangpu completely absorbed them into her soul and transformed them into a memory that she knew since she was born. These memories were none other than a mystical martial art. It was a bit similar to the dual cultivation method, but in reality it was fundamentally different. It was a mysterious and indescribably wonderful derivative method. The power of this method was quite mysterious, but it did not have any offensive or defensive power. It did not even have any benefits in raising the cultivation level of the person who cultivated it. Instead, it would greatly damage the cultivation of the person who cultivated it, and consume a lot of power. However, this method could split off the essence of life within a cultivator and fuse it together into a creature, allowing that creature to defy the heavens and change its fate, directly becoming a descendant of a cultivator and possessing all the characteristics of a descendant of a cultivator. It could be said that this technique was the gospel of all the connate gods of the primordial world. With this technique, any innate god would be able to pass down his own race and even create countless races. Although Guangpu wanted to cultivate together with Luo Fu and use their life essence to strengthen the spiritual sense inside the fruit, allowing it to directly break through the surrounding 36 restrictions and be born. However, the use of this cultivation method was not limited to 2 connate gods. 1, 3, 4, or even countless could use it. Although it was a little disgusting, it was mysterious and indescribable. When Guangpu's divine soul swept across this cultivation method, she felt an indescribable joy fill her mind. Although using this method would greatly damage her cultivation and cause her originally stable itinerant immortal realm to loosen again, it would take tens of thousands of years to stabilize it again. However, she did not care. Compared to letting her child escape from that state of captivity, this little loss was not even worth a blink of an eye. "Thank you for imparting the technique, Master." Guangpu knelt on the ground and said excitedly. The expression of Luo Fan's clone Dharma artifact did not change. He said indifferently, "Comprehend this technique first. Fu still needs you to teach him." "Yes." Guangpu bowed. Seeing this, Luo Fan's clone Dharma artifact sighed. He raised his hand and waved gently. An invisible force appeared out of thin air and lifted Guangpu's bowing figure. Guangpu knew that Luo Fan was quite disappointed in her at this time. Although she felt ashamed, she did not dare to say anything more to anger Luo Fan. She walked to the side and sat cross-legged. She closed her eyes and the tens of thousands of words and thousands of pictures of the cultivation method flowed through her mind. As this large number of pictures flowed through, Guangpu's body gradually emitted a mysterious and wonderful aura. This indescribable aura slowly expanded and expanded, wrapping around Guangpu like a flame. Seeing this scene, Luo Fan's clone Dharma artifact did not even frown. He closed his eyes slightly and immersed his mind in the endless mysteries of heaven and earth. In these years, this clone Dharma artifact had received quite a number of innate gods. The number of magical powers and magic arts that explained the truth of heaven and earth from different angles was also quite a lot. All these needed him to comprehend, organize, and then add them to the Tao Fruits Way scripture, to strengthen the Tao Fruits Way scripture. Therefore, it was not that he had nothing to do. After 3 days, the mysterious aura that wrapped Guangpu like a flame was released and retracted. In the blink of an eye, it completely disappeared, revealing Guangpu's beautiful body. At the same time, Luo Fan opened his eyes and stood up. Guangpu also stood up at the same time. Her face showed a look as if she had gained something. She bowed to Luo Fan and said, "Thank you, Master. Guangpu is ready." Luo Fan raised his eyes and swept his gaze over. He knew that in these 3 days, Guangpu had already roughly comprehended the cultivation technique, although it was impossible for him to completely understand its mysteries. However, there was no problem in comprehending with Luo Fu. Therefore, he nodded and said, "Come with me." Guang Pu bowed. Luo Fan took the lead and walked towards the valley of this space-time illusion. Guang Pu followed Luo Fan into the time and space illusion, and her heart was filled with boundless shock. The exquisiteness of the time and space illusion, she might not have been able to see it clearly in the past, nor could she comprehend it. But at this moment she had already attained the earthly immortal Tao fruit, and the strength of her senses had already exceeded her imagination. She could sense the mysterious laws contained in every inch of space around her. This was simply showing her the space-time Tao that Luo Fan comprehended. It made Guang Pu feel that she had never been so close to the great way of heaven and earth as she was now. She had never felt the existence of the mighty people of heaven and earth as she did now. How could she not be shocked? The entire space-time illusion was under the control of Luo Fan's doppelganger celestial device. Naturally, Luo Fan knew the distribution of all the innate gods in the space-time illusion. He directly came to the valley where Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang were staying. Over the years, Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang lived a rather fulfilling life in the space-time illusion. The innate gods in the space-time illusion knew that Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang were the descendants of Luo Fan. Naturally, they gave face to them. When Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang had any questions, they were not stingy in answering them. It made their cultivation realm improve a lot. Although they did not break through their current realm, they had improved a lot. Compared to before they entered the space-time illusion, it was already very different. When Luo Fan and Guang Pu arrived, they were adjusting their breath in their respective secret cultivation rooms. Luo Fan released a slight breath, and it shrouded the entire valley like a hurricane. The entire valley shook slightly, and it also attracted the attention of Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang. You go and talk to them personally. I'm leaving now. Luo Fan did not want to stay here any longer and said to Guang Pu. Without waiting for Guang Pu, who looked a little ashamed, to say anything, Luo Fan took a step and disappeared from the space-time illusion in the blink of an eye. He came back to the outside of the illusion and sat down cross-legged. He continued to sort out what he had learned in his mind. The reunion of husband and wife, mother and son, was naturally a surprise and excitement. Needless to say, it was a happy reunion. After talking to each other, Guang Pu asked Luo Chunyang to leave first. She said that she had something to say to Luo Fu. Then, she told Luo Fu the purpose of this visit. After listening to it, before Luo Fu could say anything, there was a loud shout. There's such a wonderful thing? Doesn't it mean that I will soon have a younger brother or sister? After Guang Pu and Luo Fu finished talking about the secret technique that Luo Fan had taught them, Luo Fu, who was supposed to hide to the side, suddenly popped his head out of the ground and shouted. His whole body was emitting a faint green light. Under the illumination of this light, the surrounding ground seemed to have turned into liquid. It suddenly lost its solid nature and dissolved quickly, as if there was no resistance at all. This was a wonderful earth escape technique that Luo Chunyang had learned from an innate god in the shape of a pangolin. Compared to the various escape techniques that Luo Fan had taught them, this technique was naturally inferior in terms of the profoundness it contained. However, it was completely different from what Luo Fan had taught them. It had a different kind of profoundness. When Luo Fu and Guang Pu were in a state of excitement, it was beyond the senses of the husband and wife. It allowed him to hide underground and listen to the conversation between the husband and wife without being discovered by them. Luo Fu and Guang Pu were talking about their own private matters. When they suddenly heard their sons shout, they couldn't help but be shocked. When they found out what was going on, even though Guang Pu had already attained the earth immortal Tao fruit, and Luo Fu had already opened the door to the Khanate realm and stepped into the reversion realm, they couldn't help but blush. Luo Fu was even angrier and shouted, "Little bastard, how dare you eavesdrop on your parents' private conversation? You deserve a beating." As he said this, he raised his hand and pointed. A white light rushed out from his hand and crossed a distance of dozens of feet at lightning speed. It condensed and evolved into hundreds of strange life forms in the air. In the blink of an eye, it wrapped around Luo Chunyang, who only had his upper body exposed on the ground. Although Luo Chunyang had the divine fire realm and had many wonderful techniques and celestial artifacts, his cultivation was far inferior to Luo Fu's. How could he resist? He could only let out a miserable shriek before he was wrapped up by the white light and thrown thousands of kilometers away through space. What? This isn't just about the two of you. This has a lot to do with me, okay? Luo Chunyang's voice came from afar, expressing his dissatisfaction. Little bastard, how dare you talk so much? Are you asking for a beating? Luo Fu was even angrier. If you don't want to say it, then don't say it. Luo Chunyang's voice became softer. Chapter 283. Chapter 283 Bipolar Magnetic Transducer. The place where Luo Chunyang landed was very coincidentally the residence of an innate god who had already attained Tao and obtained the ability of immortality. Under the guidance of Luo Fan, this innate god had already cultivated the innate Taoism body before he came to the spacetime illusion. His power was vast, and he was many times stronger than Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang. At the moment when Luo Chunyang was enveloped by the white light emitted by Luo Fu and was rushing towards the valley, the innate god had already sensed it. With a thought, the space of the entire valley changed automatically. In the blink of an eye, an invisible force acted on Luo Chunyang, sucking him away from the white light and allowing him to cross the space and enter the cave residence. Just as Luo Chunyang was having a headache over whether he should have a younger sister or a younger brother, he suddenly felt the space around him change. Then, he found himself in a completely new place. Startled, he turned his head and looked around, only to find a rather good-natured middle-aged man standing in front of him, looking no different from an ordinary person. When he saw this person, although he was unable to see the entire process, he immediately knew that the reason he had come here was because of this person. He couldn't help but look at this person in confusion. Haha, little fellow, you are in quite a sorry state. Do you want to learn how to receive a beating from me? The middle-aged man smiled and said. In the eyes of any innate god, Luo Chunyang was just a little guy. This was naturally because of his strength. Luo Chunyang had already recognized this person as Daoist Tianxi, who was the most slippery one among all the innate gods he had met. However, it was not so easy to take advantage of him. Thus, Luo Chunyang only curled his lips and said, "Get beaten up? Who wouldn't? You don't know about this. Although the cultivation method you learned was passed down from fellow Taoist Luo Fan, it is very mysterious, but every profession has its own specialization. I achieved the Tao as a magnet, so I was born with the ability to transform external attacks into my own strength. If you learn my cultivation method, you will be able to transform external attacks into your own strength when you are beaten in the future, and your cultivation progress will not be as fast as now." The middle-aged man said with a smile. "Don't. Grandpa said that power is not about strength, but quality. Only the purest power can be used as the basis for advancement. If I absorb impure power, I will not be able to achieve Tao fruit in the future. If I absorb mixed power, I will not be able to achieve Tao fruit. No matter how pure the converted power is, it will never be able to compare to the power that I cultivate. It will only hinder my cultivation and will not benefit me at all," Luo Chunyang said without hesitation. Although Luo Chunyang's cultivation was far less than that of the innate Taoist innate Tao, he was still an innate god who had the Tao of immortality. These words made the innate god, who had attained the Tao through magnet, reveal a look of admiration on his face, and a look of realization appeared in his eyes. With the Taoist Tao as 1 Tian Tao 1 Tao 1 Tian Tao Chen Tian 1 2 1 I. However, even if you don't want to cultivate my cultivation method, learning my cultivation method will also bring you endless benefit. If you integrate this cultivation method into your celestial device, I don't think I need to say more about the result, right? The innate god said with a smile. Luo Chunyang's eyes lit up when he heard Tianci Taoist's words. Although he knew that Tianci Taoist must have something to ask of him, he could not resist this temptation. If he integrated the cultivation method that transformed external attacks into his own strength into his celestial device, the celestial device would become stronger as it experienced more battles, and the possibility of the celestial device breaking through and becoming a magic treasure would be greatly increased. This could be said to be a transformation from something rotten to something magical. How could he not be tempted? Thinking of this, how could Luo Chunyang resist? Senior Tianci, what should I do to get this cultivation method? Luo Chunyang asked carefully. A man should know when to yield and when to stand tall. Luo Chunyang was very respectful when he asked for help. Haha. Little guy, don't be so polite. I have been in this dreamland for thousands of years, and thanks to Taoist Luo Fan's care, I have gained much more than I have in a Yuanhui period of cultivation. What's the use of imparting a cultivation method to you? However, if you are willing, I hope to study that celestial device of yours. Haha. Tianci Taoist said with some embarrassment. You mean the jade toad? Luo Chunyang was slightly stunned, and then he understood and looked at Tianci Taoist suspiciously. Tianci Taoist nodded quickly. Although Tianci Taoist was considered to be the most cunning among all the innate gods, he had little experience in the ways of the world. When he encountered the opportunity that he really desired, he finally couldn't hold back his shrewdness and showed his desire. Although Luo Chunyang was young, he was the founder of Luo Fan's spirit space after all, so he knew what Tianci Taoist was thinking at first glance. He suddenly understood and said, I see, but this celestial device is a gift from my grandfather. It is very important. If it is broken, no cultivation method can repair it. I will be very careful, and I will not break it. Tianci Taoist said quickly. But, Luo Chunyang hesitated. No buts, right? How about this? I will impart my understanding of the cultivation method to you, as long as you lend me this celestial device to study it. Tianci Taoist's weakness had been grasped, and he looked quite embarrassed at this moment. Seeing this, Luo Chunyang knew that he could not get any benefits from this innate god, so he could only stop while he was ahead. He said, The celestial device passed down by my grandfather is very precious, and I am reluctant to give it to others. However, you are so kind to me that I can hardly repay you. Well, in order to repay your kindness, I will give this celestial device to you to study. I only hope that you can keep your promise and don't break it. Although he said so, Luo Chunyang did not take action, but just smiled quietly. Seeing Luo Chunyang's expression, Tianci Taoist knew what Luo Chunyang meant, and he could not help but smile bitterly. He raised his hand and took out an irregular black stone from his bosom. This stone was black, and there was a mysterious light flowing in it, as if it contained countless things. The untainted land was so vast that even Luo Fan did not dare to say that he could know everything. Luo Chunyang was quite curious because it was the first time he saw this object. This is a cultivation method that I came up with based on my innate ability. It's called the dual-pole magnetic origin technique. It's the conclusion of my life's cultivation. You have to treat it well to be able to form a body of magnetic origin, Taoist Tianci said reluctantly. I understand. Luo Chunyang naturally would not provoke Tianci Taoist, so he said this. With a thought, the jade toad, which was hibernating in his divine fire, and was constantly being burned and refined by the divine fire, suddenly rushed out of his body like a living thing, and landed between Luo Chunyang and Tianci Taoist. This crystal-clear jade toad shook its body, and an inexplicable mysterious light was emitted from its body. Under this mysterious light, the whole cave seemed to be above the moon. In the darkness, there seemed to be traces of music that lingered on endlessly. When Tianxi Taoist saw this jade toad, he directly threw the black stone to Luo Chunyang, and then quickly raised his hand to cover it, and a gentle force wrapped around the jade toad. His figure flashed, and only left in mid-air. I have something to do, so I will leave first. After 100 years, I will return this treasure. Luo Chunyang's eyes flashed, and suddenly he saw an incomparably mysterious aurora flash in front of him. Then, Tianxi Taoist's figure disappeared without a trace. Only a black stone, the first one he saw, was left floating towards him. Is there a need to be in such a hurry? Luo Chunyang muttered, and raised his hand to take the stone. Tianxi Taoist valued the jade toad so much, but Luo Chunyang was not worried that Tianxi Taoist would take this Dharma artifact for himself. Luo Fan was like the sun in the sky, majestic, vast, and emitting endless power. In this space-time illusion, no one dared to treat Luo Fan's successor like this. He inserted his consciousness into the stone. As if his consciousness was passing through a thin layer of water, his consciousness directly rushed into the stone. Instantly, boundless light, shadows, images, and words surged towards Luo Chunyang like a waterfall from the 9 heavens, causing Luo Chunyang to feel as if he was in an ocean of information, and his entire mind and consciousness rose and fell along with the surging of this information, drifting indeterminately. Luo Chunyang only managed to sort out the general outline of the information, and by the time he came out, 3 days had already passed. This cultivation method is so mysterious? After sorting out the general outline, Luo Chunyang was filled with shock. Senior Tianxi is willing to exchange such a cultivation method for the jade toad's 100 years of comprehension. Could it be that the jade toad contains even more mysterious secrets than this cultivation method? At this moment, Luo Chunyang suddenly regretted exchanging the jade toad's 10 years of comprehension for this cultivation method. However, things had already come to this. The wood had already been turned into a boat, the rice had already been cooked, and there was nothing he could do. Just a magic tool that Grandpa casually refined has such a mysterious ability. Then, how mysterious must the cultivation method that Grandpa specially created for me be? Luo Chunyang's heart was moved, and such a thought emerged in his mind. As soon as this thought appeared, Luo Chunyang directly put the stone he obtained from Tianxi Taoist into his world in the palm. He sat cross-legged at the place where Tianxi Taoist had sat before, and closed his eyes to carefully comprehend the 9 heaven-sun transformation technique that he had cultivated. Even though he'd cultivated this technique for countless tens of thousands of years and was already extremely familiar with it, at this moment, he was moved in his heart, causing him to notice how inconceivable this cultivation technique was for the first time, and it completely suppressed his curiosity towards the bipolar magnetism technique. Luo Chunyang comprehended something in the center of the cave residence and recomprehended the cultivation method he had cultivated. On the other side, Guang Pu and Luo Fu looked at each other, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. I didn't expect that he would still be like a child when he has grown up. Finally, it was Guang Pu who spoke, breaking the delicate atmosphere between the two. Isn't that so? I thought he had really grown up when I saw him establish a sect in the spirit space. I didn't expect it to be an illusion, alas. Luo Fu sighed. Well, let's not talk about him. Now let me see our future child, Luo Fu said and changed the topic. Guang Pu nodded and raised her hand to make a seal. The shadow of the fruit, which had been engraved on her palm like a tattoo, suddenly shook and left her palm. It rushed out, swelled up like a balloon in front of her, and turned back into the shape of a rather huge, strange fruit. This fruit had been nurtured in the depths of the thunder pool in the spirit space for tens of thousands of years, so its whole body naturally carried a kind of earth and thunder nature. In the untainted land and above the moon, because of the pressure of time and space, this fruit was not so wonderful. But in the space-time illusion, which was between reality and illusion, this fruit gave birth to countless strange phenomena. There was an invisible force surging around, and wisps of electric light, like thin silk, spread out from the fruit, covered the whole cave like a spider web, and wrapped around Guang Pu and Luo Fu. So narrow! With the appearance of this strange phenomenon, an immature, faintly discernible and seemingly non-existent thought entered the minds of Guang Pu and Luo Fu, making them feel as if their hearts were being squeezed. Senior brother. Guang Pu felt like a knife was being twisted in her heart. Her expression changed, and she called Luo Fu sadly. Luo Fu sighed and said, "Well, since he has suffered so much, let's start." Guang Pu smiled like a flower and said, "Senior brother, you are so good to me." As she spoke, she raised her hand and an invisible force rushed out. The space in the cave where Luo Fu was cultivating instantly expanded 10 times. The entrance of the cave was covered with a thick layer of invisible restriction, completely isolating the inside of the cave from the outside. All possible disturbances from the outside world were completely isolated. The power that Guang Pu displayed was extremely terrifying, almost like a creation, but Luo Fu was not surprised. Previously, Guang Pu had already told Luo Fu that she had attained the earthly immortal Tao fruit. Luo Fu knew better than anyone else what kind of power a person who had attained the earthly immortal Tao fruit should have. For him, it was really normal for Guang Pu to have such power. After Guang Pu did all this, she raised her hand and waved. The strange fruit rushed up, and in the blink of an eye, it came to the center of the huge space and slowly rotated. As it rotated, the fine and dense electric light that originally filled the entire space began to rotate and dance. The electric light that was originally inconspicuous became extremely conspicuous as it danced, causing the entire space to become incomparably gorgeous. This kind of gorgeous was mixed with a lot of danger. If an ordinary person or even an ordinary cultivator came here, just the electric light that was twisting like a whirlpool would be enough to grind them to pieces and destroy the cultivator's soul. But for Luo Fu and Guang Pu, this was nothing. It just made their bodies slightly numb and felt the existence of the electric light. This is the method that Master taught me. Senior brother, you only need to cooperate with me, Guang Pu said to Luo Fu. As she spoke, she raised her hand and pointed. A spiritual light that was like a spirit snake rushed out from the Naiwan palace between her eyebrows. It wriggled and rushed in the direction of Luo Fu. In the blink of an eye, it stopped in front of Luo Fu. Luo Fu opened his mouth and inhaled, and the spirit snake rushed into his mouth. Following a strange path, it rushed into his sea of consciousness, turned into countless words and patterns, and integrated into his memory. These words and patterns were not part of the cultivation method, but a part of it. There were not many profound mysteries in it. It was simply the steps of how to operate the soul, how to operate the power, and how to export the essence and blood. This was also a choice that he had no other choice. The cultivation method that Luo Fan taught him was mysterious, and the secrets contained in it were too profound. Even Guang Pu spent 3 days to have a rough understanding of it. If it was Luo Fu, he would have spent 100 times more time, which was almost a year, and he might not be able to do it, and for Guang Pu, who cared about her son, a year's time was too long. Luo Fu naturally had complete trust in Guang Pu. Although following this step would cost him a lot of essence and blood, and it would make his cultivation a little unstable, he decided to follow this method without hesitation. His body shook slightly. He took a step forward and came to the top left of the fruit. He sat cross-legged in the void. As his power surged, a colorless, transparent, invisible flame burned on his body. Around this flame, there were strands of essence and blood, like beautiful jade, winding and flowing, like a brush drawing the outline of this invisible flame. Seeing this, Guang Pu no longer hesitated. Her body moved, and without any smoke or fire, she came to the top right of the fruit, and sat cross-legged with Luo Fu. Luo Fu followed the steps mechanically, but she needed to exhaust her mind to completely control the part that should have been controlled by Luo Fu. For her, the pressure was many times greater than normal. As soon as she came to the top right of the fruit, her expression became serious. The earthly immortal fruit that had just stabilized shook, and a mysterious aura came out of her body. Compared to Luo Fu's, an invisible flame that was 100 times stronger, and 100 times more essence and blood suddenly came out of her body, wrapping around her body. This flame was the flame of life formed from the cultivation method. It was the appearance of the cultivation realm that was displayed in a special way, and it was the driving force for the spiritual consciousness inside the fruit to break through. On the surface, the two flames of life seemed to be the same, except for the strength, but in fact, their nature was almost completely opposite. One yin and one yang, one male and one female, their nature was opposite, complementing each other, reinforcing and restraining each other. The two wrapped around the bodies of Guang Pu and Luo Fu, constantly approaching each other in midair, and in the process seemed to be struggling, as if trying to escape from each other. At this time, both Guang Pu and Luo Fu had their eyes closed. Luo Fu used the method that Guang Pu taught him, and his mind gradually entered an inexplicable state. It was as if he was in a chaotic space-time, and the feeling of time and space had completely disappeared. Only two flames of life, one big and one small, were calling him from an unknown distance in space-time. With a thought, Luo Fu's body had already followed the two summons. After an unknown amount of time, an indescribable mysterious feeling emerged in his heart. In an instant, heaven and earth split apart, earth, water, fire and wind surged, endless vitality gushed out, the chaos of the entire world completely disappeared, and the world gradually became clear, as if the fog that shrouded his heart had been pushed aside. The two flames of life became incomparably clear in his mind, and an incomparably strong sense of familiarity made him understand that the two flames of life in front of him were his wife and his future son. Understanding this, he followed the method that Guang Pu taught him, and with a leap, he merged with the incomparably huge flame of life. An indescribable feeling emerged in his heart, the two flames of life sank down, and wrapped around the smaller flame of life, which represented his future son. The three blended together like water and milk, constantly exchanging some indescribable mysterious aura. During this process, the smallest flame of life grew stronger and stronger,